Chapter 30:21. Do you think you can catch me if I want to escape? Fairy Tian Miao felt that the man in front of her was indeed powerful, but no matter how powerful he was, he could only be a quasi-emperor. This was also one of the rules of the Celestial Pole Island. It was impossible for an emperor to enter. No matter how powerful he was, couldn't he just escape? But what she didn't know was that Yi Shiwen was able to enter because he was seriously injured. Most of his martial power was used to suppress his injuries, so the martial power he could display was far less than 1/10,000th of his peak strength. This was why he could fall into the barrier. Otherwise, a terrible collision would have broken out with the barrier and the world would have been destroyed. But even so, Yi Shiwen could easily crush all quasi-emperors with his sovereign emperor body. Unless a monster who was comparable to Yi Shiwen appeared, there was a possibility that he could barely compete with him. But wasn't Yi Shiwen the only one in the universe who had such a character in countless years? Fairy Tian Miao immediately turned around and turned into a sky full of figures. She was like a fairy from the 9th heaven who had descended to the world. In a flash, she had already flown tens of thousands of miles away. Her speed had also soared to the extreme. "Come back!" Yi Shiwen shouted softly, and a big hand suddenly grabbed out. Fairy Tian Miao was already tens of thousands of miles away, but she only felt her vision go black. Then, she unexpectedly appeared in front of Yi Shiwen again. When she saw the indifferent expression on Yi Shiwen's face, Fairy Tian Miao could no longer maintain her smiling expression. It was as if she had seen a ghost. "I don't believe it!" Fairy Tian Miao's figure flashed again tens of thousands of miles away, but this time, she flew in a completely different direction. "Come back!" Following Yi Shiwen's shout, Fairy Tian Miao, who had just flown away, felt her vision go black. Then, she was caught again. This almost caused her to break down. How could this be? She didn't even have the strength to resist. Her vision went black and she was captured. If the first time could be a coincidence, then the second time could not be a coincidence at all. It could only mean that the strength of the green-robed man in front of her was astonishing. His strength was completely above hers. Otherwise, there was no way to explain why she couldn't escape. Since she had already made this judgment, she stopped struggling because no matter how much she struggled, it was useless. "All right, I admit defeat." Fairy Tian Miao suddenly felt that Yi Shiwen was right. Curiosity was the root of all dangers. She wouldn't have ended up like this if she hadn't suddenly become curious. The dignified Fairy Tian Miao had become someone else's maid. Just thinking about it made her feel crazy. "But you can't ask me to make some strange expressions, or else I'd rather die than be humiliated." Fairy Tian Miao stared at Yi Shiwen with a pair of big watery eyes and said. She didn't dare to use her charm technique on Yi Shiwen at this time. However, she was born with a bewitching physique. "What are you thinking about?" Yi Shiwen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Besides, do you think you can resist if I really want to do something? He would rather die than be humiliated? If I really wanted to do something to you, you wouldn't even have the chance to die." Fairy Tian Miao thought for a moment and realized that this was indeed the case. This man's strength was truly unfathomable. Perhaps he would really become like that, and she wouldn't even be able to resist. "Well, I'll take the initiative in that case. Anyway, I won't be able to escape this step," Fairy Tian Miao said and began to undress her clothes. She then looked at Yi Shiwen while doing so. Her clothes were as light as a feather and fell to the ground without a sound. After a while, only her undergarments were left. She finally couldn't bear it anymore. She stared at Yi Shiwen and said, "Why didn't you come and stop me?" Yi Shiwen sneered and said, "Do you really think I can't see through your little tricks? You'd better put away your little tricks in the future. Otherwise, you'll regret it later." Fairy Tian Miao was a weird person. Ordinary people couldn't tell which of her words was true and which was false. Fairy Tian Miao felt as if she had been granted amnesty. Her clothes flashed and she quickly put them back on. Then, she glanced at Yi Shiwen and muttered to herself, This is the first time I've met such an unromantic man. Is he really a blockhead? Or does he have a heart of stone? However, she hadn't finished muttering when she felt a slap on her forehead. She immediately cried out in alarm. It hurts. This time, she wasn't faking it, it was real. Her xian qi had been cultivated for a long time. Although her body looked like a jade, in fact, it was already invulnerable. But even so, she was still hurt by the slap, leaving a bloody red palm mark on her forehead. I won't teach you a lesson if you criticize me again. Yi Shiwen's voice gradually drifted away. Hurry up and catch up. Fairy Tianmiao could only rub her forehead and quickly catch up with him. You're lucky. I would have killed you if I hadn't wanted to understand something, Yi Shiwen indifferently said. Fairy Tianmiao stuck out her tongue when she heard this. Yi Shiwen spoke as if he was killing a chicken or a dog. Although she felt depressed, she didn't dare to criticize him. She would inevitably be taught a lesson if he saw through her. Then, how should I address you in the future? Fairy Tianmiao could only accept her bad luck. She couldn't do anything about it. After all, she had bumped into him. You can call me Your Honor from now on. My real name is Yi Shiwen. You can use my name if you need anything in the future, Yi Shiwen said. Fairy Tianmiao was a mischievous person. It had been a long time since someone had dared to play tricks in front of him. This made him feel as if he had changed a little. Fairy Tianmiao curled her lips. Wouldn't it be better for her to use her sex name if she needed something? The holy cult's name was much more deterrent than Yi Shiwen's name. However, she suddenly recalled something. Yi Shiwen, why does this name sound so strange? She doesn't seem to have such a character among the powerful quasi-emperors that she knows. One must know that the holy cult's status and ability were very high. She didn't know any outstanding quasi-emperors in the present world. Even if there were, they should be as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. However, she had encountered one today. Your Honor, why haven't I seen your name on the Emperor's substitute list? Or is it just a fake name? Fairy Tianmiao thought that it would be very difficult for her to say the words Your Honor. However, she seemed to be infected by Yi Shiwen's temperament. She seemed to be able to say the words Your Honor as if it was a matter of course. He had an aura that could make people submit to him. It made her feel as if she was facing the supreme elders of the cult. Do I need to use a fake name? The Emperor's substitute list? Yi Shiwen's mouth slightly curved into a smile. Yes, the Emperor's substitute list. Don't look at how you grab me like a little chick. In fact, I can also be in the top 10 of the Emperor's substitute list. Fairy Tianmiao finally found a little sense of self-confidence. Yes, I'm not a good-for-nothing. I'm one of the top 10 geniuses in the Emperor's substitute list. Fairy Tianmiao's name is very popular no matter where she goes. But, she has suffered defeat in front of Yi Shiwen. However, she looked at Yi Shiwen again. It seemed that even the existence who was ranked first on the Emperor's substitute list was not his opponent. Although she knew that there was a gap between her and that freak who was ranked first on the monarch's substitute list, it was only a gap. Even that freak couldn't carry her around like a little chick. It was simply a blow to her self-esteem. It made her, who was in the top 10 of the Emperor's substitute list, feel no sense of existence. It was a slap to her face. The Emperor's substitute list? It's really meaningless. Becoming an emperor doesn't depend on the ranking on the list. If you succeed, you can succeed even if you're not on the list. If you don't succeed, it's useless even if you're on the list, Yi Shiwen said. He didn't care about this kind of list. It could be used to measure combat strength. Some people might really have to wait for the Emperor's substitute list for a lifetime. There was no shortage of amazing existences in the 10,000 worlds of the heavens. For example, the strength of the tree god was above that of Fairy Tianmiao. However, it had been defeated in the end. In fact, not even its seed would have been left if Yi Shiwen hadn't rescued it. Therefore, the so-called Emperor's substitute list was useless in Yi Shiwen's eyes. The Emperor realm was like this. If you could cross it, then you could cross it. If you couldn't, then it was useless no matter how hard you tried. You speak as if you really understand it, Fairy Tian said in a somewhat unconvinced manner. However, she recalled that the Supreme Headmaster had once made a similar evaluation. However, she hadn't listened to it. It seemed that everyone in the myriad heavens recognized this list. Many people also felt proud to be on this list. Moreover, you're actually not the first? Yi Shiwen glanced at Fairy Tian and said. There seemed to be some disdain in his expression. Hey, it's easy for you to say that. Do you think it's so easy to get the first place? Do you know the origin of the guy in the first place? It's said that he's the reincarnation of a heavenly lord. He's more than 10,000 years younger than me. However, his cultivation has already crushed mine. Fairy Tian said immediately. Even someone as arrogant as her was sincerely convinced by the legendary first place. So what if he's the reincarnation of a heavenly lord? If one's origin can decide everything in this world, then what's the point of cultivation? I'm not the reincarnation of a heavenly lord. I don't have a heaven-shaking bloodline either. However, I'm the first. Yi Shiwen said as if it was a matter of course. First place? Why haven't I heard of it? Which mountain is the first place? Fairy Tian also felt very strange. It was reasonable to say that such a person wouldn't be on the Emperor's substitute list even if he wasn't on the 9 nether cults' intelligence. After all, the Emperor's substitute list was a supreme treasure. It automatically sensed the heavenly way and arranged the rankings. Perhaps he was an old monster who had been sleeping for countless years and had just awakened. Chapter 30:22. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that it was possible. After all, this wasn't the first time that the celestial pole island had appeared. Perhaps there was an old monster from a certain era who was stranded here and couldn't leave. Moreover, Yi Shiwen didn't look like he was boasting. Instead, he looked like he was taking it for granted. His demeanor made people believe that he wasn't bragging. Since it wasn't the current era, then it could only be the strongest person from a long time ago. Such a situation wasn't uncommon in the Fortune God dynasty. The Fortune God dynasty's history was too long, and it had produced many amazing characters. It was impossible to count them all. From time to time, a super-ancient genius who had been in seclusion for countless years would come out and compete with the peak characters of the present era. Such a situation wasn't uncommon. Therefore, Fairy Tian immediately categorized Yi Shiwen as an old monster from countless years ago. Only in this way could these unreasonable things be explained. Although they were all peak quasi-emperors, those old monsters were too ferocious and had accumulated incomparably deep skills. In the present era, there were only 1 or 2 people who could compete with these old monsters. Although Fairy Tian considered herself to be good, it was unrealistic to think that she could compete with them when her cultivation time was less than a fraction of their age. After all, those old monsters who had shaken the world many years ago were all super geniuses. Which one of them didn't have outstanding talent? Coupled with the accumulation of countless years, they were truly terrifying to the extreme. Even escaping from the hands of an enraged emperor wasn't a rare case. They were simply ridiculously strong. Thinking of this, Fairy Tian felt balanced. It wasn't that she was weak, it was just that she had lived a few years less than these old monsters. Yi Shiwen looked at Fairy Tian. He didn't know what to say because he had come from the Myriad Heavens world. Although the Fortune God dynasty was stronger than the Myriad Heavens world, he didn't think that the Fortune God dynasty was stronger than the Myriad Heavens world. Those peerless talents who had reached peak quasi-emperor wouldn't be inferior even in the Fortune God dynasty. It was just that they might not have the opportunity to come to the Fortune world. That path was simply too dangerous. Even he had almost died there. He had confirmed that the Lord of Heaven and Yi Mo's former master, the Demon King, had died on that path. Empyrean Lord Primordius had been imprisoned in there for an unknown period of time, and it was unknown how many people he had killed. What's so strange about the first place? Don't tell me you've seen everyone? Yi Shiwen said indifferently. That's not it, but it's not like I haven't heard of it. Fairy Tianmiao cautiously glanced at Yi Shiwen and said, He's the champion after all. Soon, the two of them stopped in front of the healing place that Yi Shiwen had opened up earlier. He had opened up a small world with the barrier. Fairy Tianmiao entered the small world and was shocked. To be able to casually open up such a small world, his comprehension of world laws had reached an unimaginable level. If it were her, it would be impossible. She would not be able to condense even 1% of this world. In fact, as far as she knew, even the sect master did not seem to have the ability to create a complete small world. Perhaps only the legendary heavenly venerables could do it. This was because it took too much time and energy to create a pocket world. Generally, when an emperor created a pocket world, it would at most be a half-bit wall, similar to a divine kingdom's own world. It would be equipped with certain maxims, but in fact, it would not be equipped with most maxims. This kind of pocket world was especially dependent on the existence of the spellcaster. Once the spellcaster died, it would cause the entire pocket world to collapse. Therefore, it was impossible to take care of everything. Even the Emperor Lord might not be able to do it. However, Yi Shiwen was able to do it. However, she immediately rejected this idea. This was certainly not done by Yi Shiwen. She didn't know where he had obtained the fragment of the microcosm, but he had opened it up. This was the most likely scenario. But she did not know that he could do what ordinary Emperor Lords couldn't. Previously, he had opened up a martial Emperor heaven by relying on the world laws contained in the seed of the world tree. Now, he was only opening up a small world. Compared to the opening of the martial Emperor heaven, the workload was not the same. He could complete it at any time. This was also the place where he stayed while recuperating. Although he was not afraid, he had to be careful in this state. Yi Shiwen sat cross-legged on the cloud bed in the small world, and said to Fairy Tianmiao, You will stay here for the next period of time. I have something to tell you. Fairy Tianmiao saw that she had no choice, so she stopped struggling and asked, May I know what your honor wants me to do? She had obviously given up on herself. The man in front of her was unfathomable. It would not do her any good to fight him head-on. It's just a small matter. I won't tie you to my side forever. Before I leave the island, there are some things I need your help with. There are also some things I need to consult you about. Yi Shiwen said. He did not care about Fairy Tianmiao's reluctance. With his status and strength, as long as he made a call, he could get as many followers as he wanted. Even those old monsters who had been asleep for God knows how many years would want to follow him. Followers were different from ordinary subordinate. They were very close people. Once they became a follower, they could not betray their master. Otherwise, they would be spurned by countless people and be hunted down by their master. Fairy Tianmiao breathed a sigh of relief after hearing Yi Shiwen's words. What is the situation in the Fortune God dynasty? Yi Shiwen asked. He had only thought about it for a moment, but he had already thought of many things. Fairy Tianmiao's level and grade were far higher than Fairy Jiangzhu's. Her words were far more detailed than Fairy Tianmiao's. The Fortune God dynasty was far more powerful than Yi Shiwen had expected. There were many sects established by the emperor, but the most tyrannical among them was naturally the Fortune God dynasty's government. Countless years ago, the Fortune God dynasty's ancestor, Fortune God Heavenly Venerate, established the current Fortune God dynasty and established the 4 Heavenly Venerates territories around the Fortune God dynasty. Under the rule of every Heavenly Venerable, there were numerous masters, like a school of carps in the river. However, under the Fortune God dynasty's suppression of the Fortune world was not calm and tranquil. On the contrary, in the outer regions where the Fortune God dynasty's forces had yet to penetrate, there were many unimaginably tyrannical existences. Even heavenly venerables felt that these existences were difficult to deal with. Moreover, there were many other divergent existences in the outer domain. They were opponents that the Fortune God dynasty could not defeat. Therefore, although the Fortune God dynasty's interior was considered peaceful, in fact, the Fortune God dynasty's 4 heavenly venerates were constantly at war with the outer domain. For countless years, both sides had suffered innumerable casualties. Inside the Fortune God dynasty, there were many big sects that divided the Fortune God dynasty's authority. Especially the Heavenly Tao cult, which was a tyrannical behemoth. How many masters had they nurtured in recent years? Even the Fortune God dynasty's officials were unable to infiltrate the lands under the Heavenly Tao cult's rule. In this aspect, Holy Church of Abysmal was not much different. They were both considered feudal lords. Under the rule of these large sects, there were many smaller sects established by emperors. Under the Fortune God dynasty's rule, these sects were small feudal vassals. Of course, the biggest force was the Fortune God dynasty. There were also many emperors who chose to side with the Fortune God dynasty. Yi Shiwen immediately understood a lot after Fairy Tian Miao explained. In other words, the current fortune world was divided into the Fortune God dynasty and the outer domain. In the Fortune God dynasty there were many large sects and the Fortune God dynasty. The Heavenly Tao sect and the 9 Nether Sacred cult were the leaders of these large sections. Although they usually fought with each other, they were surprisingly united when facing the Fortune God dynasty. That's how it was. Yi Shiwen nodded lightly. He seemed to have understood a lot of problems. No wonder that Heavenly Tao disciple was so domineering. Now you know. Now you're afraid. Fairy Tian Miao looked at Yi Shiwen and thought proudly. She hated Yi Shiwen for capturing her. Therefore, she had exaggerated the terror of the Heavenly Tao sect and the 9 Nether Sacred cult. But for her, this wasn't an exaggeration. In her opinion, it was more or less the same. So what? What's there to be afraid of? Yi Shiwen said indifferently. He quickly digested the information in Fairy Tian Miao's words. As for the part where Fairy Tian Miao had exaggerated, he didn't believe it at all. Fairy Tian Miao was cunning, but it wouldn't be easy to deceive him. You dared to ruin the Heavenly Tao sect's plan. Do you think that they will let you off? Fairy Tian Miao smiled and said, if the Heavenly Tao sect wants to cause trouble for you, then you can only hide in the Celestial Pole Island forever. Once the Celestial Pole Island reopens, both the Heavenly Tao sect and the 9 Nether Sacred cult will be met by the emperors. No matter how strong you are, you won't be able to contend against the emperors. When the time comes, you won't even have a chance to escape from the wrath of the Heavenly Tao sect's emperor. Then I'll kill them all. But what are you trying to say? Yi Shiwen asked. Fairy Tian Miao almost choked when she heard Yi Shiwen's words. You want to kill them all? That's an emperor, not some random person on the street. What I want to say is, are you interested in joining the 9 Nether Sacred cult? Chapter 30-23. What I want to say is, are you interested in joining our holy cult? Fairy Tian Miao looked at Yi Shiwen's small face and said in a serious manner. Join your holy cult? Yi Shiwen looked at Fairy Tian Miao and said indifferently. That's right. You've already offended the Heavenly Law sect. The people of the Heavenly Law sect will definitely seek revenge for the smallest grievance. They won't let you off. However, things will be different if you join my holy church. Would the holy church dare to start a war with my holy church just for the disciple of a quasi-emperor? Fairy Tian Miao looked at Yi Shiwen and said with a complacent expression, I believe that the supreme elders of my sect will definitely welcome an expert like you. Fairy Tian Miao looked at Yi Shiwen with an expectant look on her face. She was a native of the Fortune God dynasty. So, how could she not understand that only the Emperor realm experts had a place in the Fortune God dynasty? They could be considered as the true rulers of a region. However, these peak-level quasi-emperors were also highly valued by the major sections. After all, it was impossible for an Emperor realm expert to appear out of thin air. These peak-level quasi-emperors must have crossed the heavenly tribulation. Moreover, the combat strength of these peak quasi-emperors was not ordinary and could be said to be a very important supplement. In particular, this guy's combat strength was ridiculously tyrannical. Perhaps even the number 1 Emperor on the Emperor substitute list was no match for him. This kind of person was definitely worth roping in. Even if they had to confront the heavenly cult because of this, they would at most compensate the heavenly cult for some losses. As she had said before, she also did not believe that the heavenly cult would go to war with the holy cult for a dead quasi-emperor. This was her greatest source of confidence. Moreover, in her opinion, Yi Shiwen must have nowhere to go after offending the heavenly cult unless he also had an incomparably powerful major sect behind him. Otherwise, joining the holy cult was inevitable. If he agreed, then he would be too embarrassed to continue to restrain her. Thinking about it, she felt a little proud of her wit. Not only had she resolved the current crisis, but she had also won over a great expert for the cult. Not interested. Yi Shiwen shook his head and said. It was absolutely impossible for a person like him to join these great sections. An ordinary quasi-emperor might be able to do so, but an emperor like him, who had already walked his own path, joining a great sect might be a kind of restriction. Moreover, although what Fairy Tianmiao said was a threat, it was only a threat. What was there to be afraid of once his injuries were healed? Moreover, although what Fairy Tianmiao said was a threat, it was only a threat. The flower-like smile on Fairy Tianmiao's face suddenly froze. She still couldn't believe that Yi Shiwen had refused her invitation. Don't tell me that you don't know what kind of existence White Taoism is? Those people boast that they are the leaders of the world's great Daos, and absolutely do not allow the slightest bit of disobedience. Even towards the Fortune Divine Dynasty, they will not listen to their orders. If you offend them, other than our 9 Nether Holy Cult, no one can save you. Yi Shiwen looked at her shocked expression, and couldn't help but find it funny, and said, Since I said so, I naturally have confidence in myself. No matter how tyrannical they are, they can't do anything to me. You can think that I'm talking big, but regarding the invitation, you don't have to say it again. What is your relationship with Qin Wugo? Why is the heavenly cult chasing after him? Yi Shiwen asked. Seeing Yi Shiwen's resolute expression, Fairy Tianmiao dispelled the idea of inviting him. In any case, in her eyes, this guy must be an old monster who had been isolated from the world for countless years. Therefore, he didn't know the terror of the heavenly cult. It doesn't matter. When he leaves the island, he will know how terrifying the heavenly cult's pursuit is. At that time, will I be afraid that he won't join the embrace of the holy cult? Fairy Tianmiao immediately gave up the idea of persuading Yi Shiwen and said, Qin Wugo is my good sister. We have a very good relationship since childhood. As for why she is being chased by the heavenly cult, it is because of her father. Her father had a huge conflict with the heavenly cult in the past. Since then, the father and daughter have become a thorn in the side of the heavenly cult. Now that the celestial pole island is open, the little cow nose of the heavenly cult naturally won't let her go easily. The heavenly cult has the heavenly cult's heavenly cult. Don't tell me that your holy cult doesn't have a holy union? Yi Shiwen asked. This time, the place where the celestial pole island appeared is under the rule of the Eastern Lord. So, it is closer to the heavenly cult, and our holy cult is under the rule of the Western Lord. So, we are too far away. So, we don't have enough time. Even if we activate the interdomain transmission matrix, we won't be able to send many people over in a short time. Therefore, I, who happen to be traveling nearby, came here on behalf of the holy cult. Fairy Tianmiao replied. Yi Shiwen suddenly understood. So, that's how it is. No wonder. He had been wondering why there seemed to be a big disparity between them. However, this also gave him a piece of information. The appearance of the celestial pole island was completely uncertain. It could appear anywhere. Moreover, it would close for an extreme period of time. And it would reopen after 100 years. Basically, wherever it appeared, the forces of that area would be able to obtain relatively more benefit. So, that's how it is. I understand. Alright, I'm going to heal my injuries, Yi Shiwen said and closed his eyes to heal his injuries. Although he didn't have any healing pellets, his healing speed was very slow. But, at this time, he could recover a little bit. The danger of the Fortune God dynasty was far greater than that of the myriad worlds. She saw that Yi Shiwen didn't pay attention to her at all. He was completely ignoring her. Moreover, he looked down on her battle prowess. He wasn't afraid that she would attack him while he was healing. This was blatant disdain. Fairy Tianmiao glared at Yi Shiwen fiercely. She gnashed her teeth and puffed up her cheeks as if she was angry with Yi Shiwen. After a long time, she saw that Yi Shiwen didn't respond. No matter what expression she made, Yi Shiwen didn't respond. She felt bored. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation. In the end, she could only sit cross-legged and watch Yi Shiwen heal his injuries. Yi Shiwen's healing technique seemed to be completely different from any cultivation technique she knew. She was already a peak quasi-emperor, so she still had this kind of insight. It was just that she didn't know what kind of cultivation technique he was using. It felt a bit like the cultivation technique that her good sister, Qin Wugo, cultivated. This further strengthened her judgment. He was indeed an old monster who had been in closed-door cultivation for countless years. Otherwise, how could he have a cultivation system that even she couldn't recognize? Although the various sex inheritances were different, in general, their cultivation systems were close to the same. Only Yi Shiwen's was completely different. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen opened his mouth and said, "If you feel bored, you might as well practice." Fairy Tianmiao was startled and quickly closed her eyes. After a long time, she opened her eyes again. When she saw that Yi Shiwen's expression was unchanged, she almost thought that she had misheard him. But at this time, she didn't want to challenge Yi Shiwen's methods, so she quickly closed her eyes. While both of them were immersed in cultivation, half a year's time passed in a blink of an eye. They didn't even realize that half a year had passed. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes. His injuries had only gotten a little better in more than half a year's time. Sure enough, the injury caused by that spear was too powerful. Even with his cultivation, he couldn't heal it. He could only forcibly suppress it. However, the appointed time with Star Merchant had finally arrived. The moment Yi Shiwen opened his eyes, Fairy Tianmiao also opened her eyes. Of course, it was impossible for her cultivation to make great progress in more than half a year's cultivation. However, she did feel that her cultivation had improved. Her progress was more than 10 times faster than usual. She keenly felt that this was because the aura that Yi Shiwen was exuding seemed to have tamed the world's laws. Here, the world's laws were very obedient. So, she could easily comprehend them. Moreover, comprehending the world's laws wasn't a dangerous thing. She didn't need to worry about falling into it and becoming a part of the world. For a peak quasi-emperor like him, the probability of transforming into Tao was much higher than the probability of being struck to death by the heavens' tribulation. Well, let's go and find Star Merchant. Yi Shiwen got up from the cloud bed and said. However, I'm afraid that we'll fall into that cow-nosed brat's trap if we go like this. Half a year's time has passed. That cow-nosed brat must have already received the news. He must have set up an inescapable net waiting for us. Fairy Tianmiao couldn't help but say with some worry. She was confident that she could compete with that cow-nosed brat. However, that was only if he was alone. However, That cow-nosed brat had organized the Heavenly Law Union. There were many experts in the union. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gone to the Heavenly Law Union to seek justice for her little sister. She would have gone straight to the Heavenly Law Union to find trouble with that cow-nosed brat. The reason why she hadn't done so was because she had some misgivings. Inescapable net? What kind of inescapable net can a group of quasi-emperors arrange? Don't worry. Just follow me. I'll kill anyone who dares to stop me, Yi Shiwen said in a very natural manner. His words revealed a kind of peerless elegance that looked down upon the world. This kind of invincible self-confidence even infected Fairy Tian Miao. Fairy Tian Miao recovered after a long time. Then, she muttered, "What kind of inescapable net can a group of quasi-emperors arrange? You're talking as if you're not a quasi-emperor." However, Fairy Tian Miao's voice hadn't yet faded when she hurriedly moved to catch up with Yi Shiwen. Chapter 30-24. However, the only thing he didn't expect was that Yi Shiwen wasn't worried at all. In fact, he didn't even try to sneak around. Instead, he just casually came to the appointment. Was he too careless? Or was he really that bold? However, he immediately felt that something was wrong. What kind of person was Yi Shiwen? He was a terrifying existence that was ranked in the top 10 of the Emperor's substitute list. She disdained all men in the world. She had once said that her future husband must be an Emperor realm expert. She didn't even care about quasi-emperors. At this time, she recalled the humiliating memory of being grabbed by Yi Shiwen like a little chick. She, the dignified Fairy Tian Miao, couldn't even withstand a single blow. After entering the market, the two of them received even more gazes. However, Fairy Tian Miao was still able to sense the white-robed young noble's gaze. Moreover, the white-robed young noble didn't even try to conceal his gaze. To him, this wasn't anything. "I've brought them, but you..." Star Merchant couldn't help but look at Yi Shiwen worriedly. Young master is right. However, this old servant believes that such a person is worth roping in if he doesn't come from a great sect. Young master is now competing with Bai Daozi. In a situation where there is almost no difference in strength, whoever has a stronger follower will be stronger. This can also be considered as a victory. "What do you think, young master?" the old servant slowly said. Although that little cow's nose was powerful, he might not be a match for him. Perhaps having more people was an advantage, if that was even an advantage. The arrival of the two immediately alarmed the entire market. "That's right. Let's continue watching. If he can escape from the hands of Bai Daozi, then this young master will go and accept him as a follower," the white-clothed young master said. His gaze fell on Fairy Tian Miao, who was next to Yi Shiwen. A fiery expression flashed in his eyes. It seemed as if a group of flames was burning in them. Is this person really so extraordinary? Even Fairy Tian Miao, who is said to not marry anyone other than an emperor, is willing to become his follower. The Heavenly Tao Union didn't intend to conceal it. If Yi Shiwen appeared, then they would kill him to restore their reputation. If Yi Shiwen didn't appear, then it would be even better. Who would dare to doubt the prestige and strength of the Heavenly Tao Union? Young master is wise. In her heart, she even had a little bit of expectation. Perhaps that little cow would be able to teach this arrogant fellow a harsh lesson. However, she immediately discarded this thought. This was obviously impossible. Who knew which ravine this fellow in front of her was an old monster from countless years ago? It was precisely because of this that people felt that he wasn't simple, and they couldn't see through him at a glance. However, he was a very strange person. At times, he seemed to have an outstanding temperament that was attractive but not hurtful. At other times, he seemed to have no sense of existence at all. If one was not careful, they would easily overlook him. Yi Shiwen had already sensed that young Master Tianming was looking at Fairy Tian Miao with a possessive look in his eyes. However, He was a bit surprised to see that young Master Tianming wasn't hostile towards him in such a situation. Was it because he wanted to recruit him? Or was it because he thought that Yi Shiwen wasn't worth mentioning? He wasn't on the same level as Fairy Tianmiao. So, he didn't need to be vigilant? Looks like it's him. He looks rather strange, but I can't see anything special about him. Is this the man who had killed the experts of the Heavenly Tao Union? Someone looked at Yi Shiwen in confusion. Who is he? He's a bit interesting. Yi Shiwen glanced at the white-clothed young master and felt a bit amused. Suddenly, a commotion was heard from outside. However, it doesn't matter. We'll know his background once we get out of the island. Moreover, whether he can escape from the hands of Bai Daozi or not is still a problem. Heavenly Tao Union humph. They aren't a sect that will swallow the provocation of others. The white-clothed young master said with a smile. Yes, they felt that Yi Shiwen was as gentle as a jade. They could sense him from afar, but he didn't seem overbearing or fierce. He wasn't as dazzling as those famous peak quasi-emperors. Is this the guy who calls himself Yi Shiwen? A white-clothed elegant man was waving a fan above a restaurant in the bazaar. He looked at the two people walking into the bazaar with a smile on his face. Yi Shiwen didn't care about what these onlookers were thinking. He went straight into the bazaar and began to search for Star Merchant. There was nothing more important for him than healing his injuries. Anyone who dared to stand in his way at this time would die. It's him. Tian Miao Fairy's face revealed a bit of annoyance. It seemed that she had been pestered for a long time. Some people also expressed their dissatisfaction. They firmly believed that Yi Shiwen must have some special characteristics that they hadn't understood yet. Otherwise, how could things have turned out this way? Yi Shiwen had roughly guessed young Master Tianming's thoughts in a short moment. Such a proud person had that kind of self-confidence in his bones. Star Merchant had a look of disbelief on his face. This young master has dared to appear at this time. He thought that Yi Shiwen would hide far away if he knew that the Heavenly Law Union had set up an inescapable net to deal with him. Who would come here knowing that there was an inescapable net here? This doesn't make sense. The old servant's expression was indifferent, as he felt that it was a matter of course. For giants like them that had existed since the founding of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, they had collected all kinds of information. If it was really an old monster that had appeared in the past, even if he hadn't shown his face for several million years, or even tens of millions of years, it was impossible for him to escape their intelligence network. Have you brought the goods that I asked for? Yi Shiwen asked. Yi Shiwen's aura was very faint. He seemed like an ordinary person. He didn't seem like a powerhouse no matter how they perceived him. If not for the fact that many people had sworn that they had seen it with their own eyes, and that the night and the vicious beast's corpse couldn't be faked, they wouldn't have believed that this seemingly gentle young man could be so terrifying. It's true. This old servant has already asked the disciples of the Heavenly Mystery Pavilion. They have encountered him before. So, it should be true. However, we don't know whether this Yi Shiwen's real name or a fake one. The old servant slowly said. His voice was hoarse. It sounded as if a piece of cloth was being torn apart. He thought that Yi Shiwen would hide this time, and then secretly contact him to purchase medicinal herbs. He didn't care about this matter. As for the anger of the Heavenly Law Union, he didn't believe that the Heavenly Law Union would dare to fall out with the Heavenly Business Union because of this matter. There was no need for that. Reporting to the senior, this person is the young Master Tianming of the Heaven's Mandate Cult. There was a look of disgust in Fairy Tianmiao's eyes. All the representatives of the Heaven's Mandate Cult are called young Master Tianming. He is the young Master Tianming of this generation. Yi Shiwen arrived at the bazaar. He didn't know when the bazaar had already been filled with people. It was obvious that they had been waiting here for some time. Yi Shiwen? I have never heard of this name. It should be a fake name. The white-clothed young master said indifferently, however, I don't have any impression of such a powerful person. It's a pity that we are on the celestial pole island. If we were in the cult, I would only need a moment to find out his background." An old servant followed behind him. He was in the depths of the endless shadows. His aura was unfathomable. Occasionally, he would reveal a bit of aura, which made the space feel as if it had been imprisoned. "What's so special about him? Come and try to chop a quasi-emperor to death with your hand blade. That's a quasi-emperor, not a cabbage." However, young Master Tianming only asked him to take a look. Then, he found the figure of a star merchant in a corner of the bazaar. Everyone was shocked. However, Yi Shiwen had an indifferent look on his face, while Fairy Tianmiao was gnashing her teeth. Who wanted to be submissive? Who wanted to be his follower? Who wanted to be his follower? They had been forced to do so. This person obviously had a big background. Yi Shiwen had never concealed his identity. However, he had never wantonly spread the news. So, he had even heard his name in such a short time. It was indeed extraordinary. With his FA, it was not difficult for him to build a restaurant on flat ground even in such a desolate place. In fact, he had just condensed it using the laws. To someone like him, the thing he could not stand the most was vulgarity and brutality. He remembered the legend about Heaven's Mandate cult that he had heard before. It was a super sect. However, the people of this super sect believed that they were extraordinary. They believed that they were the chosen ones. Their martial arts cultivation was also related to this. So, they had absolute confidence in themselves. Both of their cultivations were extraordinarily powerful. Although they were quite far away from the bazaar, it didn't take long for them to reach the edge of the bazaar. The one beside him seems to be Fairy Tianmiao, right? Why is Fairy Tianmiao standing beside him? Why is she standing behind him? It feels like, how do I put it, she's submissive, the man said awkwardly. How could such a proud woman follow behind a man? How could she have a submissive look? Although it wasn't very obvious, everyone present could see it at a glance. Yi Shiwen heard this and looked up. He saw that the young master in white clothes saw the two of them looking up. He raised the wine glass in his hand and smiled slightly. "So that's how it is." Yi Shiwen nodded. It was both. Chapter 30-25. I've brought them, but you... Star Merchant couldn't help but look at Yi Shiwen worriedly. This was a super nouveau riche buyer. For such a buyer, Star Merchant didn't want to see him throw away his life. Thinking about it, his mind was in a mess. Why did Yi Shiwen kill the people of the Heavenly Law Alliance? If it was someone else, the Heavenly Business Alliance could still handle it. Soon, the people of the Heavenly Law Alliance will get the news and rush over. You should leave quickly. Star Merchant couldn't help but remind him. Yi Shiwen looked at Star Merchant and said, "They are just some jumping clowns. There is nothing to worry about. It's fine as long as you bring the goods." Just some jumping clowns? Star Merchant almost fainted when he heard this. In the whole world, the only person who dared to say that the people of the Heavenly Law Alliance were jumping clowns was probably this lord. But looking at his appearance, it didn't seem like he was pretending. Could it be that this lord really had a super background that ordinary people didn't know about? If that was the case, there was no need to fear the Heavenly Law Alliance. Bragging again. Fairy Tianmiao couldn't help but roll her eyes. Although she knew that this so-called lord was very powerful, listening to him, it seemed like he was bragging. What a group of quasi-emperors could set up an inescapable net, what the Heavenly Law Alliance was just jumping clowns, and so on. No matter how she looked at it, it was all nonsense. This boast was too big. That little cow's nose, White Daozi, was not so easy to deal with. Then, she looked at Yi Shiwen again, and secretly thought, how can someone brag so naturally? It's like it's a matter of course. Suddenly, while Fairy Tianmiao was still cursing in her heart, a noise came from outside the market, followed by a voice. Yi Shiwen is here? Come out and accept your death. An indifferent voice came from outside. Star Merchant's expression immediately changed because he could already tell that this voice belonged to the leader of the Heavenly Law Alliance, the proud son of the Heavenly Law sect, Baidaozi. Sure enough, because of the previous matter, Baidaozi personally came. But then he thought it was normal. After all, Yi Shiwen had killed quasi-emperors in seconds. Such a character could not be overestimated. It was normal for Baidaozi to personally come to solve the problem. He was just about to suggest Yi Shiwen to quickly escape, but he saw that Yi Shiwen had already turned around, leaving behind only a few words. I'll be right back. Before I come back, I hope you can prepare everything. After Yi Shiwen finished speaking, he walked straight out of the market. Fairy Tianmiao followed behind him. Behind him was the little maid. She couldn't tell who was the winner anymore. Yi Shiwen walked out of the market, only to see a young man in a Taoist robe, holding a sword in his hand, looking at Yi Shiwen with an indifferent expression. All the laws around him were trembling like the surface of a lake, with his body as the center, spreading in all directions. Behind him were more than 100 figures, all of whom were quasi-emperor experts. Every single one of them was a super expert that was rarely seen. At this moment, they were all gathered in one place. The Heavenly Tao Alliance was just an alliance formed by the younger generation of Heavenly Tao, but it was already so powerful. One could imagine how tyrannical Heavenly Tao was. Of course, the Heavenly Tao Alliance didn't only have these few experts, but the skeleton was already here. Baidaozi was a cautious person. He knew that even a lion had to go all out to catch a rabbit. When facing a legendary existence that could kill a quasi-emperor in seconds, it was not wrong to be cautious. Yi Shiwen wasn't nervous at all. He just walked forward step by step. Every step he took seemed to trample on everyone's heart. He looked very heroic. In the depths of his eyes, it seemed as if the world was being created and the universe was being born. It was extremely profound. Everyone couldn't help but be subdued by his temperament. It was completely different from the gentle and jade-like temperament they had seen before. Only now did everyone understand that perhaps he was finally serious. Facing someone like Baidaozi, perhaps even he would be cautious. Senior sister, it's really that Yi Shiwen. Among these onlookers, the people of the Heavenly Profound Pavilion were impressively among them. In the past 6 months, only Yi Shiwen had hidden like an outsider to heal his injuries. However, on the Celestial Pole Island, it could be said that the sky had already been turned upside down. It was like boiling water. It was not that no one dared to challenge the Heavenly Tao sect, but without exception, all of them had a powerful background that was not inferior to the Heavenly Tao sect. Under such circumstances, they dared to compete with them. However, who was this Yi Shiwen? Not only the Heavenly Taoism couldn't find Yi Shiwen's origin, but even the others couldn't figure out who Yi Shiwen was. Only Fairy Jiangzhu of the Heavenly Profound Pavilion had vaguely guessed that perhaps Yi Shiwen's origin was not small. However, he was not in the Fortune God dynasty, but in the outer domain. Moreover, young Master Tianming of the Heaven's Mandate sect had asked them to come, so they didn't dare to not come. Thus, they saw Yi Shiwen again. However, compared to the day when they saw Yi Shiwen seemed to be in a much better state. His injuries were also much better. Or, could it be said that his injuries had been concealed? It's really him. He is indeed an extremely dangerous person. Fairy Jiangzhu suddenly shivered. Before this, someone in the Heavenly Profound Pavilion had actually suggested to kill Yi Shiwen while he was seriously injured and take away his treasures. Such a situation was not uncommon. However, her intuition told her that Yi Shiwen was terrifying. That indescribable feeling of danger made her not dare to have such thoughts. Now it seemed that she was right. At that time, Yi Shiwen looked unparalleled, but he was not difficult to talk to. He even let them take away the sky dew grass. However, if he had any evil thoughts, she guessed that the group of people she brought with her would all be annihilated. At that time, the heavenly profound pavilion would not even be able to cry. As expected, should small forces seek to survive in the cracks? This was a terrifying existence that dared to challenge the heavenly Tao sect. When Bai Daozi saw Yi Shiwen, he should have felt some danger. However, he did not take it to heart. No matter how strong the other party was, he was Bai Daozi. So what if the other party was strong? The only thing that made him frown was the woman beside Yi Shiwen, Fairy Tianmiao. Fairy Tianmiao's 9 nether cult was not on good terms with the heavenly Tao sect. Therefore, he had fought with Fairy Tianmiao many times. Basically, he had the upper hand. However, it was only a slight advantage. If they were to fight face to face, Fairy Tianmiao would be a great trouble. Including Yi Shiwen, whose strength was unknown, he suddenly felt that it was a little tricky. You are Yi Shiwen? He had never seen a drawing before. What made him feel strange was that he had obviously looked for those who had seen Yi Shiwen with their own eyes. He wanted them to draw a drawing based on their memories. In the past, such a method had worked time and time again. No one could escape from it. However, it just didn't work on Yi Shiwen. They clearly remembered Yi Shiwen's appearance, but they couldn't draw it. Everyone could only draw a rough figure, and the face was a mass of chaos. They couldn't copy it from their memories. However, the temperament of the person in front of him made him instantly understand that it was undoubtedly Yi Shiwen. That's right, Yi Shiwen said lightly. You are Bai Daozi? You look pretty good. He looked at Bai Daozi. His strength was indeed solid, and he was not any worse than the geniuses he had seen in the heavens. Of course, in his current eyes, it was already very difficult for him to receive a not bad evaluation. If it was in the myriad heavens and realms, a not bad evaluation would allow a person with no foundation to rise to fame and become a figure that all the major sects would fight to recruit. However, Bai Daozi didn't know this. In his opinion, Yi Shiwen's unscrupulous evaluation of him was a kind of humiliation. Who did Yi Shiwen think he was? How dare he evaluate him like this? And the evaluation was only not bad. He was so angry that he wanted to laugh. Bai Daozi looked at Yi Shiwen and said coldly, I didn't come here to argue with you today. Why did you kill a disciple of my heavenly Tao Union? What's so strange about that? He wanted to kill me, so I killed him. It's that simple, Yi Shiwen said as if it was a matter of course. When everyone heard this, it seemed to be true. Whoever wanted to kill him, he killed him. This was a matter of course. However, they immediately realized that the person who was killed was not an ordinary person. He was a disciple of the Heavenly Tao Union and the Heavenly Tao School. They had only heard of Heavenly Tao disciples bullying others, but they had never heard of Heavenly Tao disciples being bullied. This was simply heaven-defying. Good. Bai Daozi was so angry that he wanted to die. Although he felt that Yi Shiwen was deliberately angering him, he still felt angry. He was truly angered by Yi Shiwen's words. This was because he could feel that Yi Shiwen's words were full of disdain and indifference. It wasn't a deliberate act. Instead, it was a genuine feeling. This made him even angrier. Yi Shiwen wasn't bluffing. It seems that you are really courting death. Bai Daozi forcibly suppressed his anger and said, Do you think you can kill a disciple of our heavenly Tao? So what if I killed him? Yi Shiwen said coldly, It's a pity. You're considered a top character on the Emperor's substitute list. However, I'm afraid that you will disappear from the list from now on. Well, the heavens have the virtue of cherishing life. I will give you one more chance. If you retreat now, it's still not too late. If you don't leave, then don't blame me for being impolite. I will kill all of you without leaving a single one alive. Chapter 30:26. I think you're courting death. Don't you know what kind of existence our heavenly Tao is? A figure flew out. Compared to the others, this figure was clearly shorter, only reaching their waist. However, his body gave off a terrifying aura, and his strength was terrifying. It was unknown what race he was from, but it was clear that he wasn't an ordinary character. Fairy Jiangzhu's complexion suddenly changed. She could feel that although they were both quasi-emperors, this person's strength was enough to easily kill her several times over. The difference was too great. A powerful quasi-emperor was the first to attack. I think the one who's courting death is you. Fairy Tianmiao took a step forward and walked in front of Yi Shiwen for the first time. She had only taken one step, but she had already set off a monstrous imposing aura. The monstrous imposing aura of this little creature had been completely extinguished. It was unknown how many layers of his body protection aura had been shattered in an instant. His body had been forced to take several steps back before finally coming to a stop. Fairy Tianmiao only took one step forward, but she had completely destroyed the aura shield of this ferocious expert. What kind of power was this? This caused many experts who had been paying attention to this side to involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. Just now, many people were doubting whether they had sensed wrongly. The dignified Fairy Tianmiao was actually following behind someone else. Was she an imposter? But now, it was clear to everyone that Fairy Tianmiao was not an imposter. But who exactly was this cyan-robed Yi Shiwen? That short creature stared at Yi Shiwen. He seemed to be in disbelief. He knew that Fairy Tianmiao and the other experts on the Divine Monarch reserve list were very strong. However, he hadn't thought that the difference between them would be so great. She had forced him to retreat in a single step. Was this the difference between a peak quasi-emperor and an ordinary one? Fairy Tianmiao felt much better after forcing back a quasi-emperor. She had had enough of this period of time. Being carried around by Yi Shiwen like a little chick had completely hurt her self-esteem. It almost made him think that his cultivation had regressed to that extent. Now, it seemed that it wasn't that her strength had regressed, but that Yi Shiwen was too abnormal. Bai Daozi frowned and coldly said, "Fairy Tianmiao, are you planning to join in and protect this madman? Is he representing the Nine Nether Church?" Fairy Tianmiao said, "I don't need you to teach me how to do things. Also, you don't need to use your sect's name all day long. Doing this is my personal idea. You don't need to use my Nine Nether cult and your Heavenly Dao sect all day long." Fairy Tianmiao mercilessly exposed Bai Daozi's thoughts. "Since you plan to protect this madman, then don't blame me for being impolite. Even if the Holy Church of Nine Nether comes looking for you, they won't be able to say anything." Bai Daozi narrowed his eyes and a terrifying light erupted from them. In the end, Fairy Tianmiao had still gotten involved. It seemed that he had no other choice but to fight. "Brother Bai, can you give me some face and let Fairy Tianmiao off this time? What do you say?" At this time, a lazy voice came from the back of the market. Young Master Tianming slowly walked out. Bai Daozi's expression finally changed. The situation had become even more complicated. Fairy Tianmiao was already very troublesome, but he had a lot of people on his side. But with the addition of young Master Tianming, the situation was completely different. An existence of that level couldn't be created just by piling on people. "Young Master Tianming, I can give you face, but only if Fairy Tianmiao is willing to step aside." Hearing young Master Tianming, Bai Daozi couldn't help but sigh in relief. In any case, it was a good thing that he didn't have to fight young Master Tianming. "Young Master Tianming, my relationship with you doesn't seem to have reached the point where I need your help." However, Fairy Tianmiao didn't appreciate his kindness. Her anger was about to erupt. "This matter isn't something you can handle. I advise you to stay out of it, otherwise you will regret it. No matter what, I won't ignore this matter. Before, Bai Daozi chased after my best sister. This debt must be settled." Fairy Tianmiao turned to look at Bai Daozi. She had wanted to vent her anger a long time ago, but before, she was alone and didn't have much of a chance of winning against him. She could only try to make him hesitate. But now it was different. Others might not know, but she knew how terrifying Yi Shiwen was. Perhaps she could borrow his hand to solve this problem. Who said that she could only be used? The opposite was also possible. Young Master Tianming's expression immediately darkened. He didn't expect that Fairy Tianmiao would still ignore his good intentions at this point. How could he put his face in front of others? However, his expression slightly improved. He had already thought about it. When Fairy Tianmiao couldn't stop Bai Daozi, she would ask him for help. It wouldn't be too late to think about it at that time. In his eyes, Fairy Tianmiao was his prey. As for Yi Shiwen, he had already been completely ignored. Offending the Heavenly Tao sect meant that he was about to die. Bai Daozi coldly said, "Young Master Tianming, it seems that this is no longer a matter of me giving you face." Fairy Tianmiao transmitted her voice to Yi Shiwen, "Senior, I can help you deal with the others, but you will have to deal with this cowsnout yourself." Yi Shiwen nodded and didn't comment. He just took a step forward and said, "Since you are so stubborn, then don't blame me for starting a massacre." White Daozi seemed to see Yi Shiwen's expression turn cold for the first time. The Emperor Lord's murderous intent could turn the world upside down in an instant. Although he didn't know what kind of power this was, he could clearly feel the danger. "Go kill him." At this time, the short creature of the Heavenly Tao Union issued an order, and the powerhouses of the Heavenly Tao Union swarmed towards Yi Shiwen like fishes. They then pounced towards Yi Shiwen. Stubborn fool. Yi Shiwen merely took a step forward and did not make any move to attack. However, a scene that was even more terrifying than Fairy Tianmiao's earlier attack took place. A quasi-emperor who was the first to pounce on him was sent flying almost instantaneously, and the top-grade divine weapon on his body collapsed in an instant, turning into specks of light that filled the sky and dispersed in all directions. His flesh and blood also collapsed and turned into a rain of blood that filled the sky. What kind of terrifying power was this? There was no lack of quasi-emperor level experts among the experts of all sides, and they were almost scared to death. What kind of terrifying existence was this? He didn't do anything, but a quasi-emperor had collapsed and died. Could it be that the emperor is alive? It must be the emperor. Apart from the emperor, who else can have such great power? Everyone was dumbfounded at this time. At this time, they thought of Yi Shiwen's words, and no one thought that Yi Shiwen was just bluffing because he was afraid of Bai Daozi. His words were priceless advice, and he was trying to persuade them. Unfortunately, no one really cared. The other quasi-emperors of the Heavenly Tao Union also realized that something was amiss. However, it was too late for them to do anything because they had already arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. All kinds of terrifying attacks bombarded towards him. If these attacks fell on a person's body, even a peerless quasi-emperor like Fairy Tianmiao would be seriously injured. However, these attacks couldn't fall on Yi Shiwen's body at all. When they were a foot away from Yi Shiwen, they suddenly exploded and turned into a rain of light that filled the sky. They couldn't even get close to Yi Shiwen. In fact, many experts could see that Yi Shiwen didn't even use his magic power, and only used the laws to completely nullify their attacks. No matter what kind of attack they launched, it was useless. Yi Shiwen walked over step by step, and his expression was calm. A wisp of flame emerged from his body, and instantly burned the sky. Wherever the quasi-emperors passed, they were all enveloped by it. These quasi-emperors used their divine tools to resist, but the divine tools were also instantly burned. After a while, their bodies began to emit green smoke, and their flesh was completely burned. Their primordial spirits struggled out of their bodies and wanted to escape. Although this would greatly damage their primordial chi, it was better than dying here. Swish! Yi Shiwen directly waved his sword chi, and these primordial spirits that wanted to escape were instantly killed. The hundreds of quasi-emperors of the Heavenly Tao Alliance were all killed in a few breaths. From now on, the Heavenly Tao Alliance would no longer exist on the Celestial Pole Island. Everyone's breathing completely stopped, especially young Master Tianming, whose face was completely pale. From the beginning, he didn't think much of Yi Shiwen, and thought that he was just a person who was about to die. Only now did he realize that it wasn't certain who the person who was about to die was. His limbs were ice cold, and he was drenched in cold sweat, as if he had been fished out of cold water. From afar, he looked very frightening. Behind him, the old servant hiding in the shadow was also completely stunned by Yi Shiwen's divine might. Fairy Jiangzhu and the other people of the Heavenly Xian Pavilion were even more scared to death, because they had mentioned this person's name before. Now that they thought about it, wasn't it an act of courting death? Killing a quasi-emperor was just like cutting melons and vegetables. Would it bring an unimaginable disaster to the Heavenly Xian Pavilion, and even the Heavenly Xian Pavilion might be destroyed because of their actions? Senior sister, what should we do? A male disciple looked at Fairy Jiangzhu in a complete daze. It should be fine. This senior is so powerful. He shouldn't be calculative with us. Chapter 30:27. It should be. Fairy Jiangzhu's face turned pale with fright. The speculation in her mind was like mushrooms after a spring rain, and she couldn't stop it at all. If it was really as she guessed, then they wouldn't even know how they died. Fairy Tian Miao's reaction was even more direct. At this time, she finally realized that something was wrong. The person in front of her was probably not as simple as a quasi-emperor. He might even be an emperor, and there was a very high possibility that he was. Even though it was impossible for an emperor to appear on the Celestial Pole Island. The barrier of the Celestial Pole Island couldn't be destroyed even by a sovereign emperor, let alone others. Therefore, it was impossible for a sovereign emperor to sneak in. After all, such a thing had never happened in countless years. Yi Shiwen didn't have any special expression after easily killing hundreds of quasi-emperors. As an emperor, the level of laws that he could mobilize was not something that those quasi-emperors could imagine. Yi Shiwen just walked step by step towards Bai Daozi. At this time, Bai Daozi's expression suddenly stiffened. He had already realized that he had absolutely underestimated the strength of the person in front of him. Not only was this person very powerful, but he was also very ruthless. Even though he knew that they were disciples of the Heavenly Law sect, he still didn't show any mercy. Then, Bai Daozi gritted his teeth and said, "Even if you are really an emperor, so what? On the Celestial Pole Island, existences of the emperor level are not allowed. If you can come in, then the only possibility is that you are not at the peak, and your strength is not at that level. Otherwise, it is absolutely impossible." Bai Daozi was also a talented and intelligent person. He almost immediately guessed all the possibilities. If Yi Shiwen was really an emperor, then the only way for him to hide from the barrier was if he was seriously injured. If he was not at the peak, then he wouldn't be able to hide. Otherwise, the Celestial Pole Island would have long been occupied by those emperor-level experts. I'm afraid that an emperor who is not at the peak wouldn't be so confident. Bai Daozi also walked out step by step like an ancient god. His body also erupted with a powerful aura, which was not inferior to that of Fairy Tian Miao. In the Fortune realm, although emperor lords were still high and mighty, they weren't as mysterious and unfathomable. Those true great sects all had emperor lords. After many people guessed Yi Shiwen's identity, they all wanted to worship him. But this white Daozi actually wanted to go against the heavens and kill the emperor? Thinking of this, everyone felt like fainting. Even in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, where heroes and geniuses came forth in large numbers, it was rare to find someone who could do this. Of course, the prerequisite was that the emperor had been severely injured to the point where he was on the verge of death. However, the Yi Shiwen in front of him didn't look like one. So where did Bai Daozi's confidence come from? It probably won't be so easy to slaughter imperial monarchs to attain the Tao with just a single Tao artifact, Yi Shiwen slowly said as he looked at Bai Daozi. He saw through Bai Daozi's trump card with a single glance. He was someone who had truly slaughtered an emperor lord as a quasi-emperor. How could he not know? Even if an emperor lord was really on the verge of death, the strength that he could erupt with was still terrifying. Those who hadn't seen it would never understand. Although Bai Daozi was strong, he might not be as tyrannical as he was in the past. And he was not the great star emperor of the past. Bai Daozi's expression didn't change. The sword at his waist suddenly flew out with a clanging sound and hovered above his head. Suddenly, everyone felt the sword Tao laws of heaven and earth become much more active. Tens of thousands of sword qi appeared in the void, each as thick as a heavenly pillar that shot into the sky, bringing with it the terrifying pressure of a Tao artifact. Tao artifact? He actually brought a Tao artifact in. Someone couldn't help but exclaim in fear. At this time, everyone finally understood why Bai Daozi was so confident. He actually brought a Tao artifact in, and it was an intact Tao sword. Sure enough, the heavenly Tao was worthy of being the leader of the many great sects in the world. This kind of foundation was unimaginable. Bai Daozi had not yet reached the Emperor Lord realm, but he could walk the world with a Tao artifact. If he had the help of a Tao artifact, it was not impossible to slaughter an Emperor Lord. After all, a Tao artifact's attack could truly threaten an Emperor Lord. After all, the Fortune God dynasty was different from the myriad heavens. In the Fortune God dynasty, many great sects had Emperor Lords presiding over them. Tao artifacts were rarely used by those quasi-emperors. In the myriad heavens, there were very few Emperor Lords, so those peak quasi-emperors had the opportunity to wield Tao artifacts. This sword, could it be the legendary Tai Yu sword? I remember now, it really is the Tai Yu sword. Legend has it that Bai Daozi is actually the spirit of the Tai Yu sword. A long time ago, the Tai Yu sword was sealed in an extremely dangerous space. Later, the spirit of the Tai Yu sword escaped, reincarnated, and was reborn as Bai Daozi. Now that you mention it, I also remember that some time ago Bai Daozi disappeared for a period of time. It was said that he entered an extremely dangerous space. I think he must have found his true body by now. If an ordinary person used a Tao artifact, they would not be able to display its true power. The possibility of using it to threaten an Emperor Lord is also very low. But if it is his true body, then it is completely different. Many people suddenly remembered that Bai Daozi's origin was also extraordinary. He was the reincarnation of the spirit of a Tao artifact, so he was invincible and had cultivated to the extreme at a young age. In addition, if Yi Shiwen was really seriously injured like everyone had guessed, then there was a possibility that he would be counterattacked. Everyone looked at Yi Shiwen, but Yi Shiwen's expression was incomparably calm. It was just the resurrection of a Tao artifact, so it was not enough to make him feel any threat, even if he was seriously injured. This sword is a good sword, Tai Yu, a good name. Yi Shiwen could imagine how high-spirited the previous owner of Tai Yu sword must have been. Just the name itself gave off a feeling of boundlessness. Bai Daozi held Tai Yu sword, and his entire aura increased by a lot. Suddenly, the entire celestial pole island trembled, as if it would surrender to this resurrected Tao artifact. Everyone felt that this was the majesty of an Emperor Lord. Even if it was a resurrected Tao artifact, it could still reflect the terrifying strength of that Emperor Lord. Everyone present was very close to him, and they all felt the boundless pressure and terror. Their whole bodies were trembling. Everyone understood why Bai Daozi was so unyielding. It turned out that he had such confidence. If he had not encountered a freak like Yi Shiwen, then he would have been able to kill gods and Buddhas in his way. You are not willing to surrender even under the Tai Yu sword? You are too arrogant. Although you are very strong in this situation, how much of your strength can you display? Daozi said coldly. He was indifferent and ruthless. The Taiyu sword in his hand made a clanging sound, and he suddenly waved it. Suddenly, an astonishing sword chi shot out, piercing through the space, and exploded in front of Yi Shiwen. As soon as the Tao artifact moved, heaven and earth could feel its terrifying aura. Because a Tao artifact would inevitably mobilize the operation of the laws of heaven and earth, everyone could feel the scene when the Tao artifact was used. This was the power of Taiyu sword. One sword could pierce through everything, and even before it had truly awakened, it had already displayed its terrifying power. Bang! This attack was directly blocked by Yi Shiwen's hand. This terrifying sword chi could only leave a few white marks on Yi Shiwen's skin. Everyone there sucked in a breath of cold air, and felt the urge to simply pass out. To be able to block a Tao artifact with his bare hands, just what level had his fleshly body reached? It had truly reached an inconceivable level. Even the ancient emperors were no better than this. Daozi's expression also became incomparably serious. He didn't know that the sword chi from the Taiyu sword was not bad. If Yi Shiwen had just become an emperor, it might have posed some threat. But now it was nothing. Compared to the blood-colored spear that had seriously injured Yi Shiwen, it was nothing. What kind of terrifying power is this? But such a strong person, how could he be seriously injured by someone? The power of an emperor. This is the power of an emperor. This attack completely alarmed the powerhouses on Celestial Pole Island who had not come. They all opened their eyes in shock, and their gazes directly looked over. It was as if they wanted to pierce through space and see what was happening on this side. You are too arrogant. Daozi's expression became more and more serious. He slowly spoke, and suddenly, the tens of thousands of astonishing sword chi above his head suddenly looked like a huge dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it pounced towards Yi Shiwen. Each of these sword chi could easily kill a quasi-emperor, and they were also a threat to an emperor. Now, all of them poured towards Yi Shiwen. It was unknown how many years of sword chi had been accumulated, but at this moment, all of them burst out at once. Boom! A series of astonishing explosions occurred, and the tens of thousands of sword chi completely submerged Yi Shiwen. Explosions rang out all around him, and suddenly, the space was shattered into pieces. Endless chaos was forced out. This was because the laws of Good Fortune Realm had been specially reinforced. Otherwise, it would have been enough to destroy the entire Celestial Pole Island. Is he dead? Everyone's eyes widened. This attack had made them all tremble in fear and shock. In their opinion, this attack was enough to annihilate the world, and it should be able to slaughter an emperor, even if it was just a seriously injured emperor. However, just as everyone was still guessing, they saw a palm stretch out from the endless aftermath of the explosion. It stretched out 2 fingers and directly caught the terrifying Taiyu sword that had fallen from the sky. Clang! A sound like that of metal colliding came from the collision. This attack has been caught. Is this the power of an emperor? Too strong. Chapter 30:28. Yi Shiwen stretched out 2 fingers and stopped Daozi's astonishing attack. It was just 2 fingers. This sword could split the entire Celestial Pole Island in half if it was outside. Even if its power is suppressed by the enchantment, this sword is still extremely terrifying. However, this sword was caught by 2 fingers. Is this the power of a real emperor? Sure enough, the difference between an emperor and a quasi-emperor is too big. Daozi's complexion suddenly changed. The person in front of him was really terrifying. He had confirmed that this person was indeed an emperor. Moreover, this emperor had just become an emperor. He was probably not the weakest among the emperors. No wonder the other party came, even though he knew that he had set up an inescapable net. In the eyes of an emperor, it didn't matter how many quasi-emperors came. They were just a group of ants. If he did not have the Taiyu sword with him, he would not even have the right to fight against him. He would have been easily defeated by him like everyone else. I didn't want to start a massacre, but it's no longer up to me now, Yi Shiwen said slowly. This was the principle of his life. Don't cause trouble. Don't be afraid of trouble. This had even become a kind of Tao for him. Since he had provoked them, there was nothing to be afraid of. He didn't think that the Heavenly Law Church would let go of this matter easily unless the other party had suffered enough. Only then would it be possible. In the past, he could force the original demon race and other emperor inheritances to bow their head. That was because he had made these races suffer. He had used his strength to prove that he was not to be trifled with. Otherwise, these powerful inheritances wouldn't have given up so easily. In their dictionaries, compromise was perhaps only suitable for a small number of forces. Everyone was horrified. Everyone could feel that Yi Shiwen had unleashed his killing intent at this time. He wouldn't hesitate to kill the people of heavenly Taoism even if they were people of heavenly Taoism. After all, an emperor would become a terrifying killing machine if he were to be disregarded. Don't say such nice words. Even if you kill me today, you will still die in the hands of my Heavenly Law Church in your current state, Bai Daozi said while gritting his teeth. However, he couldn't back down at this moment. Boom! Before White Daozi finished speaking, he swung the Tai Yu sword. Suddenly, a sword aura seemed to transform into a continent of swordsmanship, directly blasting towards Yi Shiwen. This is not how you use a Dao artifact. He didn't choose to resist the Tai Yu sword's sword aura head-on. The dark Bodhi divine hand appeared on his palm. He simply raised his hand and pressed it down slowly. There was no brilliance or terrifying fluctuations, but the Tai Yu sword's sword aura collapsed with a loud bang. This sword energy was powerful enough. However, it wasn't enough for Yi Shiwen. Even though he was seriously injured and couldn't mobilize his true strength, his opponent wasn't an emperor lord after all. Yi Shiwen stretched out his hand and grabbed the Tai Yu sword. Everyone held their breath as they stared blankly at the scene in front of them. Yi Shiwen wanted to seize the Tai Yu sword with his bare hands. He wanted to seize the Tai Yu sword with his bare hands. Don't even think about it! Bai Daozi forcibly stopped the Tai Yu sword in his hand. However, he still felt as if the Tai Yu sword was about to separate from his body. A powerful suction force almost pulled the Tai Yu sword from his hand. For a moment, the entire scene seemed to be in a stalemate. Bai Daozi seemed to have protected the Tai Yu sword. He used his status as a spirit artifact to forcibly control the Tai Yu sword. However, the crowd's astonishment didn't stop. Bai Daozi was the owner of the Tai Yu sword, and he was the one who used it. Yet, Yi Shiwen had forced him to this point. However, this stalemate seemed to last for a long time, but in reality, it only lasted for a few breaths. Yi Shiwen moved again. His hand suddenly grabbed, and Bai Daozi seemed to be frozen in place. He couldn't move at all. He could only watch as Yi Shiwen used his bare hands to seize the Tai Yu sword. Boom! In Yi Shiwen's hand, the Tai Yu sword instantly erupted with a shocking sword light. Waves of shocking clanging sounds rushed into the sky, and the terrifying sword power directly entered the endless void of the universe. In Yi Shiwen's hand, the Tai Yu sword truly erupted with its ultimate power. The entire celestial pole island trembled under the pressure of this peerless Dao tool. Many of the tyrannical creatures on the island all knelt, trembling under the power of the Dao, and begging for forgiveness from the heavens. Everyone present, regardless of whether they were willing or not, truly felt the eruption of the Dao power at close range. Many of the weaker cultivators knelt on the spot. They were forced to kneel by the laws of the Dao. This was a kneeling to the heavens. Fairy Tian Miao's body suddenly erupted with a Miao character. It bloomed with a dazzling light, blocking the crushing power of the Dao power of the Tai Yu sword. On the other side, only young Master Tianming's life character and Bai Daozi's Dao character barely blocked the Dao power of the Tai Yu sword. Once the true power of the Tai Yu sword was unleashed, only 3 people remained standing. Everyone else knelt, and some even wanted to kneel as low as possible, because the lower they were, the less they would feel the fatal Tao power. At the same time, everyone looked at the 3 people in the field enviously. Although some of them were also quasi-emperors, they were far inferior compared to these 3 people. The unaffiliated people's methods were extremely outstanding, and they even had the Tao character on their bodies to protect themselves. Clearly, these were the Tao characters condensed by emperors to protect themselves. Otherwise, they would not have been able to withstand the power of the Tao tool. And in the center of the field, Yi Shiwen was like a god of creation, standing tall in the field with an invincible aura. Sure enough, Tao tools can only truly erupt with enough power in the hands of emperors. Compared to emperors, quasi-emperors are far inferior. Everyone couldn't help but think. The Tao power of this sword even triggered a rebound from the boundary of the celestial pole island, which immediately suppressed it. No one knew who left the boundary on the celestial pole island, but it could suppress the power of emperors. It suppressed the light of the Tai Yu sword, making it much dimmer. But it still looked extremely dazzling. The sword power even penetrated the boundary and directly spread into the vast universe. A ray of light that looked like a substantial Tao light flashed and swept over the celestial pole island. It wanted to see what was happening on the celestial pole island, but in the end it gave up because it couldn't see through the boundary. This is the Tai Yu sword. Yes, it must be the Tai Yu sword. In the void, an invincible and mighty existence opened his eyes. He had been waiting on this celestial extreme island for dozens of years. He was in the vicinity and didn't move at all. It was as if he had been here since ancient times and nothing could disturb him. But when the sword power of the Tai Yu sword appeared, it instantly woke him up from his cultivation. How can the Tai Yu sword erupt with such a powerful Tao power? Could it be that someone forced by Daozi to this point, forcing him to burn his own primordial spirit to activate the Tai Yu sword to this point? He thought a lot, and many thoughts flashed through his mind. That was all he could think of. Apart from the emperors, only by Daozi could activate the Tai Yu sword to this point by burning his own primordial spirit. However, he really couldn't think of anyone who could force Bai Daozi to this point. There were only a few people who could pose a threat to Bai Daozi this time, and there shouldn't be anyone who could force Bai Daozi to this point. He couldn't understand it, but this matter immediately raised his vigilance. Bai Daozi could be said to be the leader of this generation of disciples in the Heavenly Tao sect, and he was expected to take over the position of sect master in the future. Otherwise, how could he, an emperor, come to protect Bai Daozi? Not only did he have to ensure his safety, but he also had to warn others not to attack Bai Daozi. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any accidents. He had a Tao tool to protect him, and the word Tao was fused into his body. How could he be so miserable? But there were too many things in this world that were uncertain. He suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Roar! Bai Daozi let out a low roar, and the word Tao on his body continued to burn, blooming with amazing light. The word Tao on his body was resisting the Tao power of the Tai Yu sword. It turned out that he was fighting against himself. No matter how he thought about it, he felt very sad. This Tao character. Yi Shiwen's eyes lit up. An ordinary Tao character naturally wouldn't move him. However, this Tao character was different. This Tao character was the origin of everything. It seemed to be the origin of everything. It was the origin of the world. This word Tao shouldn't be the original body. It might be a copy of an ancient word, but even so, it was already no less powerful than an ancient word condensed by an emperor. If this was the original body, how powerful would it be? He suddenly remembered that Fairy Tianmiao had mentioned before that the foundation of the Heavenly Tao sect was the word Tao. They also used the word Tao as their name, and they claimed to have mastered the heavenly Tao. That was why they were called the Heavenly Tao sect. Thinking about it this way, the origin of the word Tao was obvious. Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate and reached out to grab the word. Since he had already offended it, it didn't matter if he offended it a bit more. He felt that if he wanted to recover and break through to the fourth realm, it would all depend on this word. White Daozi screamed miserably as his body shattered inch by inch. He burned inch by inch until he turned into light in the sky. At the same time, the word Tao in his body was pulled out bit by Yi Shiwen and separated from his body. Boom! There was a huge explosion, and Bai Daozi exploded into a ball of light in the sky. Chapter 30-29. Bai Daozi had died a tragic death at the hands of Yi Shiwen. The entire place was silent. Only the Tai Yu sword was constantly emitting clanging sounds. It seemed as if it was mourning. Its tool spirit had fallen. Although it had lost its consciousness, it could still sense it. No one dared to breathe loudly. Who was Bai Daozi? It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was famous all over the world. In the future, there was hope for him to take over the position of Heavenly Tao. At the very least, he would be a great elder. However, he had died here. He didn't even have the strength to fight back against Yi Shiwen. If they were in his place, their fates would have been even worse. Especially young Master Tianming. Although there were only 2 people left standing, he felt as if he was being stabbed by a thorn. Although his pride didn't allow him to kneel to the Emperor, he wouldn't have a place to cry if he was killed by Yi Shiwen at this time. One must know that this guy didn't even give face to the heavenly Taoism, let alone the Heaven's Fate cult. At this moment, he truly understood what it meant to have one's heart higher than the heavens, yet one's life was thinner than paper. Before a true imperial monarch, all his pride and self-respect seemed so laughable. How could an existence that could be crushed to death at any moment have the qualifications to talk about self-respect and pride with another? Would people listen to the thoughts of ants? Definitely not. The difference between becoming an emperor and not becoming one was too big. His back was completely soaked, but he didn't feel anything. His whole body seemed to be paralyzed. No one could stop him, but he was completely frozen. Become an emperor. I must become an emperor. If I don't become an emperor, I'll be an ant. I'll be a puppet in the hands of others. This was the first time he had such a strong desire to become an emperor, because he had never realized that the difference between a quasi-emperor and an emperor was so huge. In the past, he had always thought that anyone who could escape from the hands of an emperor would be able to leave their name in history. It was too easy to leave one's name in history. But now, it seemed that anyone who could do that was abnormal. Fairy Tianmiao had the same idea as Yi Shiwen. When she saw Yi Shiwen killing the people of the Heavenly Tao Union as if he was chopping melons and vegetables, she had a profound realization that she would never be able to raise her head in front of these people unless she became an emperor. On the other hand, the other people's senses were even more intense. It was as if they were about to pass out from the stimulation of this feeling. Although they were considered to have stepped into the upper echelons of this world, the number of times they could see the Emperor in action was really not many. Moreover, it was such a wonderful battle. Although it was only a short time, it was enough for them to remember it for the rest of their lives. Yi Shiwen took the Tao character into his hand. He didn't think as much as the others. This Tao character contained countless great Tao. It was the origin of everything in the world. If it was really as he had guessed, even if the word Tao was just a copy, its value would still be immeasurable. It had a huge effect on his recovery and breakthrough. After receiving the Tao character, Yi Shiwen turned around and entered the bazaar. Star Merchant was already trembling on the side as he waited. Originally, he only thought that Yi Shiwen was powerful. However, the current Yi Shiwen was beyond his reach. He couldn't understand how powerful Yi Shiwen was. Originally, He thought that Yi Shiwen was just a local tycoon. However, now that he thought about it, anything that the Emperor Lord casually took out would be a divine item for him. "Senior, please accept it." Star Merchant offered a Qiankuan bag. For him, even if he didn't earn a single cent from this transaction, it would still be good. He could make an Emperor Lord owe him a favor. No matter how he thought about it, it was worthwhile. Moreover, he had made a huge profit. However, it was obvious that Yi Shiwen didn't intend to take advantage of him for no reason. He just gave him a lump of thunder source. Compared to the thunder source that was used as a deposit, this lump of incomparably pure thunder source was much bigger. It was the size of a fist. Although it wasn't big, it was indeed priceless. This transaction could be regarded as a fair one. He felt somewhat regretful. However, he had no other choice. Could it be that he had to force Yi Shiwen to accept it? Yi Shiwen turned around and left after receiving these medicinal materials that would be used for alchemy. Of course, many of these medicinal materials were actually superfluous. There were too many experts in this world. It was even possible for them to deduce the alchemy recipe based on the medicinal materials. In fact, they could even detect his injuries and so on. Yi Shiwen had used this method in order to cut off future troubles. "Wait for me." Fairy Tianmiao was stunned for a moment when Yi Shiwen had just left the bazaar. She bit her lower lip and quickly followed him. Although Yi Shiwen didn't call her this time, her intuition told her that she should follow him. Therefore, she only hesitated for a moment. Then, she followed him. The departure of these two people caused many gasps in the bazaar. Many people couldn't help but gasp for breath. They didn't even dare to breathe in front of Yi Shiwen. They were afraid that Yi Shiwen would kill them on a whim. And they wouldn't even have a place to cry if that happened. Especially young Master Tianming. He felt as if he had dodged a deadly calamity. He didn't know whether he was disrespectful to the Emperor by standing there. However, he knew that he had survived this time because Yi Shiwen had completely ignored him. This made him feel extremely aggrieved. Could it be that he wasn't even qualified to be looked at? "Your Honor, I didn't expect that you would be an emperor." Fairy Tianmiao took a long time to catch up with Yi Shiwen's footstep. She couldn't calm the shock in her heart for a long time. She had thought of countless possibilities. However, she hadn't expected that he would be an emperor. No wonder he was so disdainful of the so-called monarch substitute list. For someone who had already crossed the threshold, the list made by these people was a joke, no matter how one looked at it. A real emperor was a real emperor. If he had passed, then he had passed. If he hadn't passed, then he hadn't passed. Everything was that simple. At this time, she had felt uncomfortable calling him Your Honor without any hindrance. She wouldn't suffer any losses if she called him that. She wouldn't suffer any losses if she died in the hands of an emperor. "What's so strange about that?" Yi Shiwen said. "Because the enchantment of this celestial pole island should prevent an emperor from appearing." Fairy Tianmiao didn't think too much about it, and directly replied. She had put away her petty thoughts ever since she knew that Yi Shiwen was an emperor. All her petty thoughts were useless in front of an emperor. After all, people wouldn't reason with ants. "Oh, I naturally have my own reasons for coming here. There are some things that you shouldn't know too much about," Yi Shiwen said. Fairy Tianmiao suddenly recalled that Yi Shiwen had said that he had been severely injured by an extremely powerful person. She had thought that it was something special at that time. But now, she had a horrified feeling after thinking about it. Yi Shiwen was already so strong. So, what kind of existence was the person who had severely injured him? She didn't even dare to think about it. She felt that the world was in despair. How could there be such abnormal powerhouses in this world? Yi Shiwen and Fairy Tianmiao quickly returned to the microcosm where they had been undergoing closed-door training. Everything was completely different when they arrived here again. Fairy Tianmiao consciously guarded on one side. Yi Shiwen sat cross-legged on the cloud bed, and chanted a secret technique on the spot. Countless medicinal ingredients immediately flew out of the Qiankuan bag, and began to refine under the Nan Mingli fire in front of him. Fairy Tian Miao was dumbfounded. He didn't have an alchemy furnace. In other words, Yi Shiwen was using the world as his alchemy furnace. He was using the power of the world to refine pills for him. This was simply outrageous. As far as she knew, this was a possibility that could only happen if one's understanding of alchemy had reached an extreme level. She felt that her cultivation was growing as she watched Yi Shiwen refine pills with all kinds of skillful technique. At Yi Shiwen's level, each and every one of his moves was in accordance with the heavenly way. Each and every one of his moves was the way. Therefore, she felt that her cultivation were slowly rising even though she was just watching. She had made the right decision this time. She could follow an emperor and watch him refine pills. This wasn't an opportunity that she could have at any time. In the blink of an eye, Yi Shiwen had been refining pills for 10 years. Fairy Tian Miao also watched from the side for 10 years. Finally, she saw the pill slowly taking shape and exuding a strange fragrance. Fairy Tian Miao took a deep breath and felt that her magic power was rising rapidly. This was the ingenuity of alchemy. She had seen those medicinal ingredients. They weren't particularly top-grade medicinal ingredients. Even a quasi-emperor like Xing Shangzi could take them out. However, they had turned into such a pill in Yi Shiwen's hands. She didn't doubt that if she could swallow it, her cultivation would definitely rise. She might even attract the heavenly tribulation of an emperor. After a long time, Yi Shiwen opened his eyes and glanced at the pellet in front of him. He opened his mouth and swallowed the pellet. Immediately, he felt a warm sensation in his body and a surging power washed over his body. The extremely dark power of the curse in his body was also being eroded by this power. Originally, Yi Shiwen's cultivation was only on par with this power of the curse. He only had a slight upper hand. However, under the influence of the pill, the power of the curse was on the verge of collapsing. His physical cultivation itself was at the pinnacle, not to mention the Phoenix regeneration technique was a powerful healing technique. Without the erosion of the curse power, his injuries could almost be said to be healed in the blink of an eye wherever the power of the curse collapsed. The faster his injuries healed, the faster his speed of recovery. Time passed quickly while he was healing. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the celestial pole island to reopen. Chapter 30. The boundary that had almost solidified above the celestial pole island was finally opened. Although it would only be open for a short period of time, this was the only time that the island would be open, and it was also the time for everyone to leave the island. Just like every time the celestial pole island appeared, this didn't change. Streams of light flew out of the island. Being trapped on this island for more than 100 years had indeed made many people depressed. Not to mention that there was a super terrifying big boss on the island, an outrageously tyrannical emperor. Compared to an emperor, they were simply creatures that lived in a different dimension. Yi Shiwen's ferocious might was still imprinted in their minds, and they would not be able to forget it for the rest of their lives. He did not even need to use his hands to slaughter a quasi-emperor. From the beginning to the end, White Daozi, who had a Dao tool and the word Dao to protect himself, had only slightly injured his hands and feet. Being together with such a peerless expert with an unknown personality and faction, they had no choice but to tremble with fear and leave as soon as possible. Perhaps only Fairy Tian Miao didn't think like this among these people. She was also shocked by Yi Shiwen's strength at first, but she soon discovered that Yi Shiwen wasn't an easygoing person, but he wasn't violent either. So long as they didn't provoke him, they wouldn't provoke him either. Emperor-level characters permeated all aspects of their Dao, and those who were temperamental would not become emperor-level characters. As long as one had a good understanding of their temperament, emperor-level characters were not that difficult to get along with. Especially in the past few decades, she also felt that she had gained a lot. Watching Yi Shiwen refine pills, watching him heal, and observing him closely, the harvest was naturally not small. Is it time already? Fairy Tianmiao saw that the boundary in the distant sky had disappeared, and even felt a little depressed. Yi Shiwen also opened his eyes and said, "It's time, you can go." Fairy Tianmiao hurriedly got up and said, "Thank you for taking care of me during this period of time, Senior." Although Yi Shiwen did not really teach her anything during this period of time, it was a rare fortuitous encounter for her to observe his Tao at such a close distance. "This is nothing. I've seen you fight before. I haven't fully understood it yet, but I've gained some insight. It might be useful to you." Yi Shiwen flicked his finger, and a ball of light submerged into Fairy Tianmiao's body. Fairy Tianmiao stared blankly for a moment. Then, she reacted. She had already seen some of Yi Shiwen's insights. Yi Shiwen didn't really understand the cultivation techniques of the 9 Nether cult. However, he had the mysterious space. So, he could deduce a lot of things from a few words. Many of them had opened up a different path. Moreover, there were many insights that she had never seen before. This made her ecstatic. Just these insights alone had saved her at least several thousand years of cultivation time. What she had been painstakingly searching for might just be something that an imperial emperor could easily see through. "Thank you, Senior," Fairy Tianmiao hurriedly said. "If I can step into the monarch realm in the future, it will definitely be thanks to Senior." Yi Shiwen glanced at her and said, "You don't need to thank me. After all, I didn't do anything. This can be considered as a token of my appreciation for ordering you around all these years. Well, you can go now. You can't participate in the following matters." Fairy Tianmiao suddenly thought of something, and that was the invincible monarch of heavenly Tao stationed outside of Heaven's Pole Island. Once he received the news, he would definitely fly into a rage, and a battle between monarchs would be unavoidable. It would be tantamount to courting death if she were to get involved in the battle between these two emperors. "Thank you for reminding me, Senior. But please forgive this junior for being rude. I still want to mention old matters. If Senior is willing to join my 9 Nether cult, then even the heavenly Taoism may not dare to do anything to you." Fairy Tianmiao slightly raised her head and looked at Yi Shiwen. She clearly knew what these words meant. However, she had been very grateful for this period of time. She was a crafty person, but she wasn't a heartless person. She clearly knew the consequences of offending the heavenly Taoism. If someone dared to kill her, the 9 Nether cult wouldn't let them off. She also didn't want to see this senior walk into a dead end. Moreover, she knew that although Yi Shiwen had been recuperating all this time, a mere few decades weren't enough for him to completely recover to his peak state. The situation was disadvantageous to him. Moreover, this wasn't a peak quasi-emperor like she had initially expected. He was a genuine emperor. If such a person could be recruited into the cult, then the significance would be unimaginable. It would be like setting up a new mountain peak. In the fortune world, many great sects existed side by side. The competition between these great sects was also incomparably fierce. There was only one way for them to compete, and that was to see who had more emperors. In the Fortune God dynasty, it was the high and mighty emperors who had the most authority. They were like the radiance of the bright moon that ruled the entire heavens. As for quasi-emperors like them, even peak quasi-emperors, they were nothing more than sparkling flames. They couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as the emperors. When these quasi-emperors entered the Fortune God dynasty, they would have the status of a feudal lord. When they entered a supreme sect, they would immediately establish their own sect and become a grandmaster. This was the ultimate goal of countless people's cultivation. Being able to escort an imperial monarch back was a great contribution, and there was naturally no need to mention the benefits involved. Yi Shiwen glanced at Fairy Tianmiao and said, "You don't need to say anything about this matter. Quickly leave." Yi Shiwen's aura gradually grew stronger. In the past few decades, he had forcibly restrained the recovery of his injuries because it was inconvenient to stay on this island. If his recovery exceeded a certain limit, he would be suppressed by the rules of this Heaven Pole Island. Not to mention, there was also the suppression of the restrictions. But now, he didn't have to worry about this anymore. Fairy Tianmiao bit her lower lip and said, "If Senior changes your mind, you can come to my 9 Nether Holy Cult. I will take my leave then." Fairy Tianmiao's figure directly flew to the top of the island. As soon as she left, a terrifying aura enveloped the entire Heaven Pole Island. This aura was filled with extreme anger. When an emperor was angry, the earth would shake and the mountains would shake. Dragons and snakes would rise from the land. Everywhere was filled with destructive aura. The native creatures on the island who couldn't leave could only tremble under this terrifying aura. It's time to break free from these shackles. Yi Shiwen stood up from the cloud bed and said. For him, he had been restricted for a period of time. Naturally, he was shackled. And now, he was the last shackle. From now on, he could fly as high as a bird in the sky and as a fish in the sea. Although I haven't recovered to my peak, it's enough. It should be enough for a fight. Yi Shiwen's figure suddenly flew out. Suddenly, a big hand appeared in the sky and fiercely slammed down towards Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if it wanted to slap him to death. Clang! The sound of a sharp sword being unsheathed came from Yi Shiwen's body. In the void, a terrifying sword chi was unsheathed and cut the big hand in one fell swoop. It couldn't stop Yi Shiwen from flying out. After Yi Shiwen left, the Heavenly Pole Island began to slowly disappear into the void. Your Excellency, how dare you kill the people of my Heavenly Dao sect? A cold shout came, and a figure descended from the void. It was a tall figure with 3 heads and 6 arms. He looked like a legendary sage Shura. His body carried a monstrous and terrifying aura. In the surroundings, many experts of various forces who hadn't left yet were terrified when they saw the arrival of this sage. Shura Sage Emperor. I didn't expect that he would personally receive someone this time. Who knew that he wouldn't receive anyone this time? I'm afraid he's going to be furious. I'm afraid so. How come I've always heard that Shura Sage Emperor is an invincible existence among those alien races in the outer domain? Why did he come back? I just heard from the disciples who entered the island that Yi Shiwen is also an emperor. Now 2 peerless emperors are going to have a big fight here. Everyone was discussing. In any case, the emperor was a high and mighty existence in their hearts. There was no way to determine who was stronger and who was weaker. So what if I kill him? Yi Shiwen said indifferently. His expression didn't change much. So what if I kill him? Over the years, I've rarely seen anyone who dares to be so disrespectful to my Heavenly Dao sect. Even if you are an emperor, don't even think about escaping. However, I don't have the authority to punish you. You should come back with me to see Senior Brother. Shura Sage Emperor said, Senior Brother has always been kind and benevolent. Maybe he won't kill you and will only imprison you for life. Hee, that's funny. If you have the ability, come and try. Yi Shiwen said indifferently. Stubborn. Shura Sage Emperor looked at Yi Shiwen coldly and finally made his move. He blasted out a punch, and the rules of heaven and earth reversed. Everyone could feel it and even see it with their naked eyes. Shura Sage Emperor was known for his physical strength. He attacked with a shocking attack. Everyone could feel how terrifying this attack was. Everyone was afraid. The earth shook and the mountains shook. They all retreated far away. 6 paths of reincarnation. Yi Shiwen blasted out a punch, and a 6 paths of reincarnation fist formed behind him. He didn't show any weakness, and he directly punched out. Boom! The 2 peerless fist techniques completely exploded under the attacks of the 2 extremely terrifying people. They collided and devoured each other. This is just the beginning. Shura Sage Emperor was born with 3 heads and 6 arms. This was not a law world, but a real body. Therefore, every punch of his was able to exert its strength to the extreme. This punch didn't succeed. Immediately after, the remaining 5 punches blasted out. In an instant, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Chapter 30-31. The Shura Holy Emperor was born with 3 heads and 6 arms. Each of his punches contained a powerful force that directly reversed the flow of the laws, forming a reverse momentum. It was extremely terrifying. These laws condensed into particles that were divided and recondensed. Each of his fists was not materialized at this time, but the condensation of laws. The Shura Holy Emperor's strength was indeed extraordinary. He had definitely stepped into the peak of the first realm and was a powerful figure who had already touched the threshold of the second realm. Originally, for Yi Shiwen, who had truly stepped into the peak of the third realm and touched the threshold of the fourth realm, it was not considered a threat. In the Emperor realm, the difference between each realm was like heaven and earth. But now that Yi Shiwen's injuries had just recovered, it formed a confrontation. These 5 punches instantly blocked the sky and the ground, spreading in all directions. Yi Shiwen had nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. Yi Shiwen did not move at all, allowing the 5 punches to bombard the void. There were sounds of tremors and destruction everywhere, and all kinds of cracks appeared in the sky. It was a scene of great destruction. Clang! A sword light appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand. Suddenly, countless sword techniques emerged at the same time. This sword light was like a monstrous momentum. It instantly turned into an endless river of stars and directly rushed towards the 5 fists. It seemed as if it wanted to completely explode and shatter these 5 fists. The Taiyu sword was as steady as a mountain. In Yi Shiwen's hand, it exploded with amazing power. This was the first Dao tool he had obtained in this world. Yi Shiwen did not want to reveal his identity for the time being, so he simply used the Taiyu sword to fight strong enemies. In the past few decades, the Taiyu sword had undergone preliminary refinement, but it was enough. It was enough. Rumble! The sword light and the fists collided. They were both Emperor Realm techniques, and the void instantly collapsed. This is the Taiyu sword. The Shura Holy Emperor immediately recognized that it was the Taiyu sword that broke his attack that Bai Daozi carried with him. Some time ago, Bai Daozi had found his true body, and it had caused an uproar in the heavenly Dao sect. Because of this, Bai Daozi had become the future successor of the sect master. Otherwise, the Shura Holy Emperor would not have personally taken charge of the celestial pole island. He thought that it was foolproof, but who knew that he would fail at Yi Shiwen's hands? You actually dared to kill him and take the Taiyu sword. You're dead. The Shura Holy Emperor was furious, but before he could attack, Yi Shiwen had already rushed forward. He took a step and appeared in front of the Shura Holy Emperor. He traveled through space, as if he had traveled through time. He arrived in front of the Shura Holy Emperor instantly. Taiyu sword slashed out and the sword rainbow shot up into the sky. It was as if it had pierced through the entire sky, wanting to cut down all the stars in the endless universe and blow up the sun. Behind Yi Shiwen, there seemed to be countless sword gods chanting supreme sword scriptures. Everything about Sword Dao was completely reflected in Yi Shiwen's sword. Although he was not a swordsman, his understanding of the sword principle far exceeded everyone's imagination. When Yi Shiwen slashed out with his sword, the laws of heaven and earth seemed to have been replaced by Yi Shiwen's Sword Dao laws, which bombarded the Shura Holy Emperor. The Shura Holy Emperor immediately felt that Yi Shiwen's understanding of Sword Dao had reached an unimaginable level. The names of many Sword Dao experts flashed through his mind, but it seemed that none of them could match up to the person in front of him. But by the time he reacted, it was too late. All the aura he emitted was nothing in front of Yi Shiwen's sword. He was defeated again and again, completely defeated, and disintegrate it. By the time he reacted, Yi Shiwen's sword was already in front of him. Clang! Yi Shiwen's sword strike seemed to have struck on a piece of metal. A steel armor appeared on Shura Holy Emperor's body. The patterns on the armor were simple and unadorned. No one knew which era it was popular in. Each pattern contained the Great Path. It was the Shura Holy Emperor's personal Tao item. He was most proficient in close combat, and this Taoist robe had greatly increased his combat power. In the end, Yi Shiwen's sword was unable to break the Tao tool. "How dare you use the Taiwa sword to slash me?" The Shura Holy Emperor was not a pushover. He suddenly opened his eyes, and his aura suddenly soared. His figure seemed to have grown a lot taller, like a giant standing in the sky. Coupled with his 3 heads and 6 arms, the demon god that had existed since time immemorial, his strength soared in an instant. The Shura Holy Emperor was overjoyed when he saw that Yi Shiwen dared to approach him. The nomological laws on his Taoist robe became more and more intense. Countless heaven and earth's vitality was absorbed, causing the aura energy around his body to become more and more intense. "Take my Shura Holy Fist." The Shura Holy Emperor's voice was cold. His clothes fluttered in the wind. This time, he was finally in front of Yi Shiwen. It was enough for him to display his greatest advantage. Shura Holy Fist. Hiss. It is said that the Shura Holy Emperor relied on this fist technique to become invincible in the world. He finally succeeded in becoming an emperor. Who knows how many foreign experts have been killed by this set of fist techniques? It is said that it also contains the Shura Holy technique. I wonder if it's true? Seeing that the Shura Holy Emperor was finally going to use this fist technique, everyone was shocked. This was because this fist technique had created too great of a reputation. All 6 of his fists danced out at this moment. Each of his fists contained a different Tao. These 6 fists were like a formation that sealed everything up. The Shura Holy Emperor's aura soared. He did not seem like a creature of this world. Instead, he seemed like the most terrifying monster in the world. These 6 fists came crashing down like 6 huge meteors. They shattered everything and tore Yi Shiwen into pieces. Shura Holy Fist? Yi Shiwen's countenance didn't change. For others, this fist technique was truly earth-shattering and earth-shattering. However, it wasn't necessarily so for him. In an instant, Yi Shiwen also punched out. This punch turned into countless fist shadows. It was like the projection of an endless world. Boom! The fists of both sides collided. "You want to block my Shura Holy Fist with just one punch?" The Shura Holy Emperor's eyes widened. His breathing was like thunder. He tried to increase his strength and blast out endless Tao trajectories. "I'm not just blocking it. I'm going to counterattack." Yi Shiwen sneered. Then, everyone saw a terrifying scene unfold. Yi Shiwen's fist directly broke through the Holy Shura Fist. It seemed as if it was tearing the sky apart, and it directly hit the Shura Holy Emperor's body. "It's impossible for you to break through my Taoist robe with your strength," the Shura Holy Emperor sneered. Even though he was hit, he did not panic. This was because Yi Shiwen's Taiwa sword had not been able to break through his defense. Bang! However, the Shura Holy Emperor was sent flying before he could finish his sentence. It was as if he had been attacked by some terrifying force. He felt his entire chest churning. Blood was in his throat. He almost spat it out. How is this possible? His strength is so much stronger than before. He immediately reacted. It wasn't that his strength had weakened. It was that Yi Shiwen's strength had increased. At this time, he remembered that in the information he had received, Yi Shiwen seemed to be seriously injured. That was why he was able to stay on the Celestial Pole Island. He was originally very happy. One was in peak condition, while the other was seriously injured. His condition was even lower than the limit of a sovereign emperor. There was no suspense about the outcome of this battle. This was also the reason why he attacked with lightning speed. However, he didn't expect that after leaving the celestial pole island, Yi Shiwen didn't need to suppress the recovery of his injuries. He recovered a lot in a short fight. You only understand now? Isn't it a little too late? Yi Shiwen's indifferent voice came from all directions, and he directly caught up to the Shura Holy Emperor who had been blasted away. As his strength recovered, Yi Shiwen's methods became more and more diverse. He was definitely not limited to this. The Taiyue sword in Yi Shiwen's hand suddenly slashed down. The sword light seemed to have transformed into a mountain range. It fell from the sky and could split the Shura Holy Emperor into pieces in an instant. How can he be so powerful? I'm going all out. The Shura Holy Emperor's aura was suppressed to the limit. It was as if Yi Shiwen alone had sealed all the laws between heaven and earth. The reason why a sovereign emperor was so much more powerful than a quasi-emperor was that a sovereign emperor could control all the laws at any time. A quasi-emperor could only fight with his own laws. How could a person compete with heaven and earth? In a battle between sovereign emperors, to a large extent this was also dependent on this. Especially when there was a huge suppression of realms, it would form a terrifying gap in combat power. Now Yi Shiwen had displayed such a crushing gap. At this time, the Shura Holy Emperor understood that the person in front of him was definitely not easy to deal with. Yi Shiwen was not as simple as someone who had just entered the sovereign emperor realm. Even if he was seriously injured, he couldn't let his guard down. A huge domain formed around the Shura Holy Emperor. Within the entire domain, the Shura Holy Emperor used his domain laws to compete with heaven and earth. It made up for the part of the law control that Yi Shiwen had taken away. Boom! Yi Shiwen opened his palm. His 5 fingers turned into a mountain and directly smashed down, striking into the Shura Holy Emperor's domain. It was unknown how many laws of the Great Tao were contained in each finger. It was unimaginable how powerful it was. Under this attack, the Shura Holy Emperor's domain was almost shattered. It couldn't be blocked at all. The Shura Holy Emperor could only watch as the big hand ruthlessly smashed into the Shura Holy Emperor's chest. Puff! The Shura Holy Emperor finally couldn't control it this time. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His whole body streaked across the sky like a meteor and flew backward. Chapter 30-32. The experts from the various sects who were watching the battle from afar felt a chill run down their spines. Especially young Master Tianming, who had just returned from the Celestial Pole Island. His scalp went numb. Initially, when he saw Yi Shiwen beating up the Heavenly Tao Union's quasi-emperors, he was shocked and terrified, but he didn't think much of it. It wasn't strange for an Emperor Lord to beat up a quasi-emperor. However, what was truly frightening was that Yi Shiwen could beat up the Azura Holy Emperor even though he had yet to recover from his serious injuries. Although the situation wasn't completely one-sided at the beginning, this trend became more and more obvious as time passed. Although the Azura Holy Emperor wasn't a veteran Emperor Lord, he had been an emperor for more than 100,000 years. His prestige had long been deeply engraved in everyone's hearts. But now, this legendary figure was being beaten up. It was conceivable that Yi Shiwen's strength wasn't limited to emperors, but emperor lords as well. The same thought emerged in everyone's mind. Who the hell was this? The Fortune Divine Dynasty's history was too long. Old antiques could come out from anywhere, and there were too many to count. The Azura Holy Emperor's body almost collapsed in the void. This attack had seriously injured him. What was even more frightening was that Yi Shiwen's strength was still increasing. He was already so terrifying when he was seriously injured. What realm was he at when he was at his peak? At this moment, the Azura Holy Emperor truly felt that he was in huge trouble. Such an expert wouldn't be manipulated by others. However, he had already reached this point. So, he couldn't afford to retreat. In fact, he didn't even have the time to think. Yi Shiwen had already rushed down to kill him. He descended from the sky like a golden-winged rock. The Azura Holy Emperor let out a long roar and forcibly gathered his spiritual power. His 6 palms condensed into fists and directly punched out. A destructive power erupted, especially the Taoist robe on his body. It seemed as if it was burning. All the attacks swept out in all directions like a tide. This shocking attack erupted in an instant in an attempt to salvage the situation. He wanted to blast Yi Shiwen away and give himself a chance to catch his breath. It's just a small trick. Yi Shiwen flew down from the sky and punched out in all directions. The 6 paths of reincarnation appeared behind him. He clenched his hand into a fist and punched out with the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. One punch shattered all of Shura Saint Emperor's attacks. Yi Shiwen's fist didn't slow down at all, and it directly landed on the Shura Holy Emperor's body. Pooh! The Shura Holy Emperor spat out a mouthful of blood along with some minced meat. Even his internal organs had been severely damaged by the series of attacks. Boom! The Shura Holy Emperor slammed into the ground at lightning speed. It was as if a magnitude 10 earthquake had occurred. The ground cracked, and a huge, bottomless crack appeared. The Shura Holy Emperor had been thrown into the crack a long time ago. Hiss, what a terrifying battle strength! Oh my god, I'm not mistaken, right? How tyrannical is this Yi Shiwen? Heavens, if they were fighting in outer space, they could destroy an entire galaxy with a single strike. Compared to the Emperor, we are too insignificant. This won't do. We have to quickly inform the Supreme Headmaster. Let the Supreme Headmaster come personally and subdue this bastard. At this time, the remaining experts of heavenly Taoism finally panicked. At this time, even an idiot could see that the Shura Holy Emperor's battle strength was far inferior to Yi Shiwen's. Moreover, the gap would only get bigger as time passed. They hurriedly began to send messages in the direction of heavenly Taoism. However, at this time, they couldn't enter the battlefield of the battle. They were pushed out by an incomparably powerful aura. The area had already become a special domain, and it was automatically isolated. They couldn't even talk about being of any help. They could only worry helplessly on the sidelines. Yi Shiwen's expression was incomparably indifferent. The Taiyu sword in his hand let out a soft buzzing sound. Then, a sword key appeared out of thin air. It transformed into an astonishing sword rainbow in the sky, pounced down on the spot like a big dragon, and fiercely fell into that crack. Boom! It was another world-destroying sword strike. The entire area seemed to be on the verge of being destroyed by the two people's battle. Even though they were in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, where an emperor's battle strength was greatly restricted, they still had the ability to destroy heaven and earth. Whoosh! 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 The Taiyu sword in Yi Shiwen's hand spat out one shocking sword aura after another. It continuously bombarded the crack. Boom! 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 Everyone couldn't see what was happening in this crack. They could only hear loud sounds and see that this crack was expanding at an astonishing speed. One could well imagine how terrifying Yi Shiwen's sword chi was. Many people couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air as they imagined the scene of them falling on their bodies. Suddenly, just when everyone thought that the Shura Holy Emperor in the crack wouldn't be able to escape this calamity, roar! An angry roar came from the huge and bottomless crack. Then, a figure covered in blood jumped out from it. This figure looked extremely miserable. He was born with 3 heads and 6 arms. 2 of his heads had been cut off, and only 3 of his 6 arms were left. 3 of his arms were cut off. Blood sprayed everywhere. The golden blood fell down, and every drop turned into a vast ocean. Not to mention there was so much Emperor's blood. Many people in the distance didn't even care about the battle between the 2 emperors. They only saw the sky full of Emperor's blood. Everyone who became an emperor had swallowed countless treasures. There was no part of their body that wasn't a treasure. Emperor's blood was one of the most precious medicinal materials in the world. If a mortal had the opportunity to swallow or even touch a little bit of Emperor's blood, they would be transformed into a peerless genius. Their future would be limitless. However, more people felt a sense of suffocation. Although they already knew that Yi Shiwen was very strong, it was beyond everyone's expectation that he would be this strong. Yi Shiwen's aura was still increasing, as if there was no end to it. No one dared to imagine how strong he would be at his peak state. The Shura Holy Emperor, who was at the peak of the First Realm, couldn't fight back at all. Yi Shiwen felt that without the suppression of the Celestial Pole Island's restriction, his recovery speed was much faster than before. Even in the midst of a fierce battle, he could still feel his strength rapidly recovering. He felt a rare joy in his heart. In the Fortune God dynasty, strength was everything. Without enough strength, one wouldn't have the confidence to speak. The Shura Holy Emperor stared at Yi Shiwen and murmured, "With my blood body, I offer it to the heavens." The Shura Holy Emperor came from a mysterious and powerful clan. He had a special secret technique that ordinary people couldn't understand. Once he used it, it would be extremely powerful. As the Azura Divine Emperor used his secret technique, blood stopped flowing from his body. Even his sovereign blood, which had created a massive crater in the ground and made everyone's eyes red, instantly evaporated. Even his severed head and arm began to be sacrificed. Is this a sacrifice? Yi Shiwen looked at everything coldly. With his eyesight, he could naturally see that this was a sacrificial technique. There were similar techniques in the heavens and realms. However, one had to pay a price to obtain the kind of power one wanted. In order to fight against him, the Shura Holy Emperor had to pay a huge price. Even his severed head and arms might not be able to recover. However, he wasn't in a hurry. He breathed in and out for a long time. Every breath was like a long river, forming an amazing breath. Endless vitality was being sucked in and absorbed by him. Yi Shiwen, you forced me to this point. You will pay the price. The Shura Holy Emperor finally opened his eyes and stared at Yi Shiwen. Do you think you're my opponent just because you used this sacrificial method? You are too naive. Yi Shiwen didn't care. Perhaps, even if I use this technique, I may not be your opponent. Shura Holy Emperor's indifferent face revealed a bitter smile of self-mockery. He had truly suffered in Yi Shiwen's hands. However, it's enough to delay you. He knew that heavenly Taoism should have received the news at this time. All the experts were on their way. As long as he delayed Yi Shiwen, he would eventually be able to see the scene of Yi Shiwen's death. Delay me? What a joke. You are using sacrificial techniques to become stronger. Don't tell me I haven't changed? Yi Shiwen sneered. The reason why he allowed the Shura Holy Emperor to sacrifice himself was that he also needed time to recover. Both of their strengths were increasing to the limit. However, he believed that his strength would increase faster than the Shura Holy Emperor's. Shura Holy Fist. The Shura Holy Emperor rushed towards Yi Shiwen in one breath. Right now, he was in his peak state. He not only wanted to delay Yi Shiwen, but he also wanted to seriously injure him or even kill him. The remaining 3 fists shot out fist shadows that filled the sky. Each fist was pure gold. It was as if everything in the world had completely turned into a golden kingdom. It brought along a terrifying tide of heaven and earth. Yi Shiwen stepped out on the spot and directly crossed the layers of space. The Tai Yu sword directly slashed out. Countless sword Dao Law talismans instantly formed around his body. They condensed into a long sword Dao river that instantly crashed down. Rumble! It was another shocking collision. The Shura Holy Emperor's fist shadows that filled the sky were split apart by the Tai Yu sword. All the illusions were broken. The sword fell and ghosts and gods cried. Chapter 30-33. Yi Shiwen's sword broke through the Shura Holy Emperor's attack. It almost split the sky into two halves. The terrifying waves set off even shocked the Shura Holy Emperor. He retreated again and again, barely dodging Yi Shiwen's attack. Damn it! The Shura Holy Emperor's expression was very ugly. In just a short time, the strength that Yi Shiwen displayed was like a different person. His strength had increased crazily. Impossible. How can your recovery speed compare to the power that I obtained from the sacrifice? He couldn't believe it, but he didn't have time to think about it. He only had one thought left in his mind, which was to delay enough time until the other experts of heavenly Taoism arrived. Otherwise, today might be the day he, who had been unstoppable for countless years, would die. At the same time, countless fist talismans appeared behind him. At this moment, they completely condensed together and formed a vibrating cut. They formed a sharp talisman that wanted to crush everything. At this moment, his power had truly been raised to the limit. In fact, he had already soared to the combat power that only a second-realm cultivator could possess. This sacrificial secret technique was indeed powerful. It could allow even imperial lords to possess combat power that surpassed their limits. I don't believe that you can withstand such an attack. The Shura Holy Emperor roared and punched out with his fist. It was wrapped in countless fist talismans and formed a monstrous wave. Yi Shiwen's expression didn't change. He directly slapped down with one hand and turned it into a seal. In an instant, this seal seemed to have formed the momentum of a martial emperor descending in all directions, suppressing all directions. All martial arts were under his control at this moment. All the power was disintegrated in the face of this terrifying seal. Yi Shiwen used the seal technique of the martial emperor's seal to fight the Shura Holy Emperor. The strength of both sides had risen to the peak. Rumble! Yi Shiwen's martial emperor's seal directly bombarded the Shura Holy Emperor's fist. The Shura Holy Emperor let out a blood-curdling screech. Another arm was directly crippled by the martial emperor's seal. It turned into a mass of blood mist and scattered in all directions. The Shura Holy Emperor's all-out attack could barely raise his strength to the second realm. However, the strength that Yi Shiwen had recovered had already allowed him to stand firmly in the second realm. He had far surpassed the level that the Shura Holy Emperor had recovered. Shura Holy Emperor roared. He gritted his teeth, endured the pain, and punched again. He didn't give Yi Shiwen a chance to catch his breath. His heart was already in turmoil. Judging from the fact that Yi Shiwen could easily restore his strength to the second realm, he must not be at the peak of the second realm. This made him even more desperate. He absolutely couldn't let Yi Shiwen restore his strength easily. This was the only thought in his mind. His eyes suddenly opened, and there seemed to be infinite power suddenly appearing in them, shooting out astonishing divine light. He pointed at the spring of nirvana, and suddenly punched out with his remaining two fists. Heaven and earth were reversed, collapsing together. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Waiting for your reinforcements to arrive? I think you're thinking too much. Yi Shiwen could see through people's minds. This little trick naturally couldn't escape his observation. If he wanted to wait for reinforcements to arrive, the premise was that the Shura Holy Emperor could stop him. Yi Shiwen slashed down with the Tai Yu sword in his hand. Clang! There was a huge roar, like the sound of metal colliding. The Tai Yu sword slammed into the Shura Holy Emperor's fist. Originally, the fist that had been sacrificed had no problem going head-on against a Dao tool. However, at this time, after this shocking collision, cracks appeared on the Shura Holy Emperor's fist. Many cracks began to spread in all directions like a spider web. Then, more and more cracks appeared. Finally, after a loud bang, the two fists instantly exploded into countless fragments. Each fragment scattered in all directions. After the sword destroyed the Shura Holy Emperor's two arms, the Shura Holy Emperor finally realized how powerful he was. Even under the state of sacrificing himself, there was still a huge gap between his strength and Yi Shiwen's. Most importantly, his strength had climbed to the peak, while Yi Shiwen's was just the beginning. Let's go. At this time, the Shura Holy Emperor retreated again and again. He didn't dare to fight Yi Shiwen head-on. He already had the intention to retreat. Shura Holy Emperor, didn't you want to take me to see your sect master? Why are you running away now? Yi Shiwen's voice was indifferent. He also absorbed the flesh and blood of the Shura Holy Emperor in the sky to speed up his recovery. Unfortunately, the Shura Holy Emperor's realm was far lower than his. Although the Shura Holy Emperor's flesh and blood had some effect, it could only speed up Yi Shiwen's recovery. It couldn't immediately restore Yi Shiwen to the peak. Moreover, the Shura Holy Emperor's flesh and blood had been sacrificed. The remaining energy in the flesh and blood had been burned. The Shura Holy Emperor almost spat out blood. He had seen bullies before, but he had never seen someone bully like this. However, this wasn't the time to care about this. All of his arms had been destroyed, and his upper body was bare. He looked extremely bleak. He stepped on a blood-red rainbow and fled in the direction of the Heavenly Tao sect. How could Yi Shiwen give him this opportunity? His strength was improving, and his strength was recovering. The power of the curse inside his body was no longer able to cause a fundamental impact on him. He could now transfer more of his martial power to fight instead of using it to suppress the power of the curse. Yi Shiwen chased after him. Every step he took seemed to cross a world. Although the Shura Holy Emperor's speed was very fast, and his speed had risen to the peak under the state of sacrifice, it was nothing in front of Yi Shiwen. However, he was caught in a flash. You're going too far. I'll fight you. The Shura Holy Emperor was forced into a desperate situation by Yi Shiwen. All of the power in his body was stimulated at once. It formed a giant energy hand out of thin air. 6 fists blasted towards Yi Shiwen. He had exhausted all of his strength. Yi Shiwen stood in the sky with a dignified appearance. He was like the most ancient god in the world, ruling everything between heaven and earth. He was the center of the universe. He was the center of the world. Dominate the world! Yi Shiwen's expression was indifferent. He slashed down with his sword. The power that had been restored to the second realm suddenly blasted out. Rumble! The Shura Holy Emperor's 6 condensed arms exploded in an instant. Then, the sword light blasted into the Shura Holy Emperor's body, causing a shocking explosion. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen's sword energy violently exploded inside the Shura Holy Emperor's body. He screamed again and again, and retreated again and again. Blood and bone fragments flew everywhere, and his body was dripping with blood. He had been seriously injured by Yi Shiwen's sword. The sacrificial state was useless to the Shura Holy Emperor. He thought that it would be a blessing, but it didn't have much effect. He couldn't suppress Yi Shiwen's sword chi that was rampaging in his body. At this time, his last bit of fighting spirit had been destroyed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen wasn't someone he could fight. Yi Shiwen, my heavenly Taoism won't let you go. I won't let you go either. The Shura Holy Emperor roared as he fled into the distance. He was infuriated by Yi Shiwen. Won't let me go? I don't think you have the chance. Yi Shiwen sneered. His figure flickered, and he caught up with the Shura Holy Emperor. He slashed down with the Tai Yu sword in his hand. Bang! The Shura Holy Emperor was hit again. The Taoist robe on his body fell apart. The continuous battles, especially with such terrifying intensity, had already caused his Taoist robe to be full of cracks. Yi Shiwen's attack completely tore his Taoist robe apart. Without the protection of the Taoist robe, his body also fell apart on the spot. The Shura Holy Emperor's split body tried to recover again, but Yi Shiwen didn't give him the chance. He slashed down with his body and spirit, turning them into nothingness in an instant. The Shura Holy Emperor is dead? Everyone's eyes widened. It was as if they couldn't breathe and were suffocating. Even in the Fortune Divine Dynasty, An emperor realm master was still a high and mighty master. The fall of any emperor realm master would cause endless turbulence, and many people would be affected. Moreover, they had witnessed the death of an emperor lord in front of them. It was like a dream. This Yi Shiwen is really too fierce. Even the craziest person hadn't thought that this would be the result. At most, Yi Shiwen would defeat the Shura Holy Emperor and escape. Such a result was already very shocking. But the truth was that the result was even crazier than they had expected. The heavenly Taoism had suffered heavy losses in the Battle of the Celestial Pole Island. Not only had they lost hundreds of quasi-emperors and disciples like Bai Daozi, who had a high chance of entering the Emperor Lord realm, but they had also lost an Emperor Lord. It was completely imaginable what kind of uproar this news would set off when it reached the heavenly Taoism. Fairy Tianmiao, who hadn't left yet, was even more dumbfounded. She knew very well that even if she could enter the Emperor Lord realm one day, it would still take a very long time to compete with a person like the Shura Holy Emperor. But Yi Shiwen was actually able to beat the Shura Holy Emperor. From this, she could see some things. This made her feel even more regretful that she hadn't been able to pull Yi Shiwen into the Nine Nether Holy Cult. After Yi Shiwen killed the Shura Holy Emperor, he took the Shura Holy Emperor away. It would also help him recover. Then, he left without looking back. He knew that the heavenly Taoism's revenge would arrive soon. Before that, he had to be prepared. Chapter 30-34 Eastern Domain. Astral Star Sect was located at the border of the Eastern Domain. Although it could only be considered as a second-rate sect, it was backed by a super sect, the Astral Star Sect, which allowed the Astral Star Sect to have many experts. However, because it was located at the border of the Eastern Domain, although it was separated by the Endless Sea region, it had many conflicts with the Outer Domain. Therefore, it was different from the sects of the Inner Domain. Every few decades, the Astral Star Sect would open its mountain gate to recruit disciples to make up for the disciples who died in the conflicts with the Outer Domain. Each mountain gate of the Astral Star Sect was like a star. When the entire mountain gate's encampment was combined, it was like a boundless starfield. This was an astonishing great array used to attract the power of the stars in the sky, allowing the disciples of the Astral Star Sect to cultivate with twice the results with half the effort. Because the cultivation method of the Astral Star Sect was mostly related to the power of the stars, the cultivation speed would be tremendous within this array. This also reflected the difference between the Astral Star Sect and the ordinary sections. After all, they had the backing of a great sect, and all kinds of arrangements were very extraordinary. On the stone steps that extended down from the mountain gate, a young man was kneeling on the stone steps, motionless. It was as if nothing in this world could move him. This Sun Ziwang is still kneeling? The disciples of the Astral Star Sect constantly passed by. When they saw the young girl kneeling there, they couldn't help but not know whether to laugh or cry. Really, it seems like he has been kneeling here for 10 years. It has indeed been 10 years. He is really persistent. Does he really believe that there is a powerful senior here? How is that possible? Even the sect master personally came to investigate. There is no such thing as a senior. He must have seen a ghost. Many people had already heard of this matter. Even if it wasn't originally news, it became big news after Sun Ziwang kneeled for 10 years. It was said that 10 years ago, Sun Ziwang had inadvertently seen a very powerful big shot and insisted on kneeling here to beg that big shot to become his disciple. He had been kneeling for 10 years. However, during these 10 years, no one had appeared. Even the sect master of the Astral Star Sect was alarmed by this matter and had personally come to take a look. However, in fact, he hadn't seen the big shot that Sun Ziwang had mentioned. Therefore, Sun Ziwang quickly became a laughingstock. He became the target of ridicule for countless people and became thoroughly famous in the Constellation sect. Everyone felt that this was his fantasy. How could there be any formidable senior? This was the astral sect. Although the astral sect wasn't considered a big sect, it had the backing of a colossus like the astral sect. Even an emperor-monarch wouldn't act recklessly here. Alas, he is really pitiful. It is said that his family members were all killed in the last invasion of the foreign domain. He joined our astral sect in order to take revenge. But it's useless. It's impossible for him to take revenge. It's said that the one who destroyed that area was an emperor-level expert. He has no hope in this lifetime. Maybe it's because I've received too much stimulation that I'm hallucinating. Sun Ziwang turned a deaf ear to these comments and remained unmoved. He only knelt on the ground without moving, like an ascetic. Alas, why bother? Come in with me. A sigh came from the void and a figure slowly emerged in front of Sun Ziwang. Sun Ziwang's face revealed a pleasantly surprised expression when he saw this figure appear. It was because the person he had been waiting for was the person in front of him. He had been waiting for 10 years. When he got up, a sore and numb feeling crawled all over his body. He hadn't used any of his power in the past 10 years in order to express his sincerity. He had almost collapsed as soon as he got up. Fortunately, he promptly circulated his power throughout his body and expelled the sore and numb feeling. He was surprised to find that he was obviously moving, but there wasn't any abnormality in the eyes of the people around him. They didn't even have the slightest strange expression. It was as if they hadn't seen him at all. He immediately understood that someone must have used a magic to isolate him. He immediately became excited. The person who could play this trick under the nose of the astral sect was absolutely a great expert. He followed that figure and walked faster and faster. Soon, he entered a different dimension. It was obvious that he had already left the Fortune Divine Dynasty's plane. The shock in his heart was difficult to conceal. It must be known that the space of the Fortune world was incomparably firm. Almost all of these dimensions were naturally formed. On the contrary, there were very few that were formed after birth. This was because it wasn't possible for an ordinary person to form such a dimension in the Fortune world. On the sacred mountain of this dimension, high up in the clouds, a blue figure appeared indistinctly. The figure who had led him here had also turned into a sky full of clear air and disappeared in front of Sun Ziwang. Sun Ziwang quickly understood. He quickly knelt down and said, "Junior Sun Ziwang greets Senior." In the clouds, he opened his eyes and looked at Sun Ziwang. 10 years ago, in order to avoid the search of the heavenly Taoism, he had to find a quiet place to recuperate and make a breakthrough. He had chosen the astral sect. Sun Ziwang had inadvertently seen him, and he had knelt outside for 10 years. The head of the astral sect had been alarmed and had come to investigate. However, a trivial quasi-emperor naturally couldn't see Yi Shiwen's whereabouts. Sun Ziwang's sincerity was commendable. However, Yi Shiwen didn't have the intention to give him a way out. If he accepted a random person as a disciple after kneeling for a few years, then he would have too many disciples. However, what really changed Yi Shiwen's mind was that Sun Ziwang had the physique of a heavenly devil even though he was a human. After coming to the Fortune world for a while, he discovered that there were also the human race, devil race, phoenix race, dragon race, and so on in the Fortune world. However, they weren't as strong as in the myriad heavens world. There were still many races that could be compared to these races. Moreover, it was different from the races in the myriad heavens world. Because of the existence of the Fortune God dynasty in the Fortune world, all the races were under the rule of the Fortune God dynasty. Although there were still contradictions between the races, it wasn't as sharp as in the myriad heavens world. The main conflict was the struggle between the Fortune Divine Dynasty and the various sects, as well as the struggle for enlightenment. Therefore, it was very common for the sects to have people of different races, and even mixed bloods of several races were not uncommon. This was completely different from the myriad heavens world. Therefore, there was a human like Sun Ziwang in the astral sect. However, what surprised Yi Shiwen was that Sun Ziwang actually had the physique of a heavenly devil. In the myriad heavens world, the devil race was a race. However, in the Fortune God dynasty, the devil race was a Dao, a kind of attribute. Everyone could become a devil, and everyone could become a devil. There were also many devil cultivators in the Fortune God dynasty, and they were quite powerful. The devil race in the Fortune God dynasty wasn't like the 8 great royal clans in the myriad heavens world. Anyone who had become a devil could call themselves a devil. It was the same in the myriad heavens world. A human who had become a devil would become a human devil. There were all kinds of bloodlines in the human race, and there were as many physiques as there were stars in the galaxy. However, the heavenly devil physique was extremely rare. Therefore, in Yi Shiwen's opinion, Sun Ziwang had chosen the wrong side. Although Sun Ziwang was considered good in the astral sect, it was still a waste of his heavenly devil physique. If he had become a devil cultivator, he would have made tremendous progress. In fact, his potential wouldn't be inferior to Fairy Tianmiao, White Daozi, and the others that Yi Shiwen had met before. It wasn't impossible for him to step into the sovereign emperor realm in the future. At that time, he wouldn't have let down the Devil King's trust. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had taught him well. Yi Shiwen had entered closed-door training to recuperate 10 years ago. He had finally recovered to the peak of the third realm. He had just come out of closed-door training, and he already knew about Sun Ziwang's matter. He didn't want to pay attention to him. However, who would have thought that he would discover Sun Ziwang's hidden heavenly devil physique? This physique was hidden very deeply. It wouldn't be easy to discover it if Yi Shiwen didn't have the skill. He had once promised the Devil King that he would find a suitable successor for him. After all, he had inherited a part of the Devil King's mantle. However, he couldn't be considered as the Devil King's successor. Yi Mo was only the Devil King's tool spirit. Moreover, he had already become an emperor, so it could be said that he had taken another path. However, he wasn't a successor. Yi Shiwen had inspected some people when he had passed through the devil world in the myriad heavens world. However, it was a pity that none of them met the requirements of the Devil King's successor. Innate physique was very important for a cultivator. The more compatible the physique was, the more rapid and limitless one's future would be. Yi Shiwen was the only one in the entire world who could forcibly practice the devil power with the physique of an ordinary person. Moreover, he had the help of the mysterious space. It was a miracle that no one else could replicate. However, the lifespan of an emperor was unlimited. Therefore, he hadn't been very anxious about this matter. However, Sun Ziwang had appeared in front of him at this time. This had made him think of something. This was indeed a good seedling. Sun Ziwang's heavenly devil physique, coupled with his perseverance, would be the best for him to practice the devil power. "Get up," Yi Shiwen said in a gentle voice. "Thank you, Senior," Sun Ziwang quickly said. His palms were tightly clenched. He hadn't felt this way for a long time. Ever since he caught a glimpse of her, he firmly believed that if there was a time in his life where he could change his fate, it had to be now, and it had to be this person in front of him. "Master, please accept me as your disciple," Sun Ziwang gritted his teeth and said. Yi Shiwen looked at Sun Ziwang and said with a faint smile, "Why do you want me to be your master?" Chapter 30-35. Because I want to take revenge. Sun Ziwang gritted his teeth and said, "Because my parents died in the hands of foreign creatures. I must kill my enemies with my own hands." Even if you want to kill your enemy with your own hands, you don't necessarily need to look for me. Even if the Constellation Sect doesn't have a sovereign overseeing it, the Constellation Sect does. Wouldn't it be more hopeful to look for them? Said Yi Shiwen as he looked at Sun Ziwang. There are too many talented disciples in the astral sect. It won't be my turn. Sun Ziwang gritted his teeth and finally said it in a dejected manner. It was indeed not easy to admit that he was inferior to others. Then, are you sure I will teach you? Yi Shiwen asked. I'm not sure, but if I don't try, I'm afraid I won't have any hope in this life, Sun Ziwang said honestly. He also knew that if such a super expert hated him, he might not have the chance to change his fate in the future. Very well, at least you didn't try to deceive me. With Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, he could naturally see through everything at a glance. Junior doesn't dare, Sun Ziwang quickly said in fear and trepidation. Since I brought you in, I'll say it directly. I'm not from the astral sect. I'm not even from the astral sect. Are you mentally prepared for this? Yi Shiwen asked. I'm ready, Sun Ziwang said. He wanted to take revenge, so he tried every means to join the astral sect. However, it turned out that the astral sect wasn't suitable for him. No matter how hard he practiced, he wasn't outstanding among his peers. For revenge, he could sell his soul to the devil, let alone this. May I ask for your name, master? Sun Ziwang was overjoyed and said. He wasn't stupid. After hearing this, how could he not understand that Yi Shiwen had the intention to accept him? Don't call me master. I don't intend to accept you as a disciple. I'm only teaching you martial arts on behalf of others, Yi Shiwen said, but I can still be a teacher. Teacher and master were not the same concept. The so-called a teacher for a day is a father for life was actually a master. Because not only did he have to teach martial arts, but he also had to teach everything, just like a father. The teacher was only responsible for imparting some specific knowledge. Strictly speaking, they couldn't be confused. Greetings, teacher. Although Sun Ziwang was a little disappointed, he didn't dare to show it. Yi Shiwen saw his expression and said, although I'm only teaching on behalf of someone else, but you can't think that he's inferior to me. In fact, in terms of cultivation, he may be a notch higher than me. His title is Devil King. As for my name, my surname is Yi Shiwen, and my given name is Martial Emperor. However, it's best that you don't say anything to the public because I'm currently hiding from an extremely powerful enemy. So, it wouldn't be a good thing for you if you knew too much about me. Yi Shiwen said. Yi Shiwen? Sun Ziwang suddenly opened his eyes wide because he finally thought of something. Although he had been kneeling for 10 years, it didn't mean that he didn't know anything. The disciples who came and went could always bring some news. In the past 10 years, the eastern domain had been in chaos. Legend had it that a peerless demon had appeared and killed by Daozi and other peerless geniuses of the heavenly Tao. Later, he had even killed Shura Holy Emperor, who had been an emperor for many years. His ferocious might was monstrous. In many legends, this was enough to stop a child from crying. However, he had never imagined that the legendary demon who could stop a child from crying was actually the teacher in front of him. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't seem like such a character. Then, he was overwhelmed by an extreme surprise. An emperor level master was still a high and mighty existence in the Fortune God dynasty. God knew how many people wanted to become a disciple of an emperor level master. Once one became a disciple of an emperor, it would be like a carp leaping through the dragon's gate, and the great hatred in his heart would have hoped to be avenged. Although it was a little regretful that he didn't become a disciple of his teacher, but another master. But just by listening to the name, he knew that this person was not an ordinary person. He was also an emperor, because in the Fortune God dynasty, there was no difference between the myriad worlds and the Fortune God dynasty. Ordinary people would not dare to use suffixes such as monarch, emperor, and emperor. Only those who had truly reached the emperor level could have such a possibility. In other words, the person who had taught him was an emperor, and he had also become a disciple of an emperor. This kind of opportunity could be said to be extremely great. His super enemy was just an emperor-level master. Devil Path's reputation wasn't very good in the myriad worlds and the myriad worlds, but reputation was nothing as long as he could take revenge. Yes, I'm that Yi Shiwen. So, don't say anything to others. Otherwise, I'll be fine, but you won't have a foothold in the eastern region, Yi Shiwen said. He had just come out of closed-door training, and he already knew that Heavenly Tao had been searching everywhere for his whereabouts. They had even blocked the entire eastern region's transmission array. Anyone who wanted to enter or leave would have to undergo inspection. This had aroused the dissatisfaction of many big sections. However, no one was willing to provoke Heavenly Tao at this critical juncture when Heavenly Tao was burning with anger. So, they could only turn a blind eye to this. Fortunately, Heavenly Tao hadn't gone to the extreme. They hadn't gone so far as to block all the roads and prevent people from leaving. They only needed to undergo inspection. Heavenly Tao had done this to prevent Yi Shiwen from escaping from the eastern region. However, they hadn't thought that Yi Shiwen had never thought of escaping. Therefore, they had spent a lot of time at the border. Heavenly Tao could only set up defenses at some key junctures. Then, they would search everywhere. After all, the strength of one sect was limited. It was impossible to cover the sky with one hand. Even Astral Sect had been visited several times. However, they hadn't found Yi Shiwen hiding in the dimensional plane. Astral Sect was behind Astral Star Sect. Therefore, the people of Heavenly Tao wouldn't dare to act recklessly no matter how strong they were. They would only conduct a cursory inspection at most. And this was exactly what Yi Shiwen wanted. This was also the fundamental reason why he had chosen Astral Sect in the first place. This disciple understands. Sun Ziwang quickly bowed and said. This teacher was carrying the monstrous killing intention of Heavenly Tao. However, how could an opportunity have fallen on him if it wasn't so? Since he had already reached this point, there was nothing to be afraid of. Do you know why I've given you a way out? Do you really think that I've been moved because you've knelt for 10 years? Yi Shiwen said with a faint smile on his face. I wouldn't dare. Sun Ziwang might have had this kind of idea before. However, it had disappeared without a trace now. How could he speculate about an Emperor-King level expert? He was thinking too much if he wanted to accept him as a disciple because he was moved. It's because you're suitable. The Devil King's demonic power is world-shaking. So, the disciple must also have such aptitude. Yi Shiwen said. This was the most important reason why he had chosen Sun Ziwang. Of course, he had already conducted a moral assessment. This moral assessment didn't make him a saint. It just didn't allow him to commit treacherous acts like betraying his master and destroying his ancestors. Yi Shiwen was very confident in his vision. It was impossible for him to make an error in judgment. That's why I said that you're not suitable to practice the martial arts of the Constellation Sect. The martial arts of the Constellation Sect may be regarded as brilliant, but it's not suitable for you. It will restrict your heavenly devil physique. So, the most suitable way is to practice the demonic power. Didn't your parents die in the hands of the foreign creatures? So, you'll have a great chance of taking revenge if you can successfully practice the demonic power that I've passed on to you. Yi Shiwen said. He had naturally thoroughly investigated Sun Ziwang since he was going to accept him as a disciple on behalf of the Devil King. With his current means, this was as easy as lifting a finger. Thank you very much, teacher, Sun Ziwang said in a happy and sincere manner. I'll still be doing closed-door training here for a period of time. But I'll leave an avatar to guide you in your cultivation. You'll come here every once in a while. I'll check your progress and teach you new martial arts. As for the rest, you'll need to obtain and plunder by yourself. This is how the demonic path works, Yi Shiwen said. He came out of seclusion this time and took in Sun Jinwang on a whim. In his plan, the next step was to truly break through to the fourth realm. For this, he had prepared for a long time. Now that his injuries had healed, he could naturally break through to the fourth realm in one go. For the sovereign kings, the fourth realm was a very obvious watershed. From the initial stage to the intermediate stage, their combat prowess would go up a big step. At that time, they would be able to calmly deal with the pursuit of the heavenly Taoism. Yes, Sun Ziwang replied. Yi Shiwen glanced at him and separated a wisp of his spirit avatar. Then, his main body slowly disappeared in front of Sun Ziwang. Yi Shiwen's avatar looked at Sun Ziwang and said, "Internal power is the foundation of all martial arts. I'll teach you the Devil King's internal power first. Then, I'll teach you martial arts and so on. You can learn them one by one. From now on, you'll come here every once in a while. If you want to obtain anything else, you'll have to rely on your own hands to fight for it." "Yes," Sun Ziwang said. Although he knew that it was only an avatar in front of him, he didn't dare to slack off. From now on, he had to rely on himself to fight for everything. And now, he had a sovereign king as his teacher. In a sense, he was standing on the same starting point as those peerless geniuses of the supreme sections. If he still couldn't take revenge in the end, then he would have nothing to hope for in this life. While Sun Ziwang secretly vowed to avenge his family, Yi Shiwen had already entered closed-door training and was in the stage of sprinting with all his might. Chapter 30-36. In order to break through to the fourth realm, Yi Shiwen had been preparing for many years. The fourth realm was different from the previous ones. Even the difficulty of all the previous breakthroughs was not as difficult as the fourth realm. This was the stage and strength of advancing from the initial stage to the middle stage of the Sovereign Lord realm. His foundation hadn't been sufficient before. However, he had made continuous preparations over the years. In addition, he had also obtained a rubbing of the Tao character. This was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise for him. He had been able to peer into the origin of the Great Path. He sat cross-legged on the cloud bed, and the enlightening mind ancient tree behind him was constantly blooming with dazzling seven-colored light. It was just a seedling in the past, but now the enlightening mind ancient tree had already grown into a towering tree. However, it was different from the original enlightening mind ancient tree. Yi Shiwen had guessed that the enlightening mind ancient tree might be a subspecies of the world tree. However, it was far less powerful than the original world tree. However, he had obtained a sapling of the world tree. So, he had decided to cultivate a part of the enlightening mind ancient tree's characteristic. He did not simply think that the enlightening mind ancient tree was far inferior to the world tree. At least in terms of assisting in cultivation, the enlightening mind ancient tree was far superior to the world tree. Since Yi Shiwen had cultivated to this level, there were very few external objects that were useful to him, especially those that directly helped him in cultivation. Apart from the enlightening mind ancient tree, there was only the mysterious space left. His cultivation speed was so fast, not just because of the mysterious space. The mysterious space's effect was more significant, helping Yi Shiwen overcome various difficulties. The influence of the enlightening mind ancient tree was like a thin stream of water, speeding up Yi Shiwen's cultivation. Yi Shiwen wouldn't have been able to step into the sovereign emperor realm without the help of the enlightening mind ancient tree. So, he wouldn't have been able to break through to the fourth realm. The word Tao emerged in front of him. Although it was just a rubbing, it was also a product of the heavenly Taoism. Naturally, it was also a high-quality product. Just the material that carried this rubbing version was rare in the world. Yi Shiwen swallowed a yellow middle plum, and it turned into monstrous martial power. It was endless like the sea, and part of it poured into the mysterious space. Suddenly, in Yi Shiwen's eyes, the word Tao was not just the word Tao, it began to evolve into many words. These words were simple, profound, and difficult to understand. However, they were like the nerves of creation in Yi Shiwen's eyes. They contained supreme mysteries. At the same time, many special Tao runes appeared around Yi Shiwen. These were the scriptures that he had borrowed from the various emperor lords. Although they didn't have specific cultivation methods, Yi Shiwen didn't need them. What he needed were words that directly touched upon the great Tao. These chapters turned into Tao runes that began to corroborate the Tao character. There were even many truths of the great Tao contained within. This Tao character was indeed extraordinary. Yi Shiwen frantically urged the mysterious space during this process, and began to deduce the various mysteries of this Tao character. Time passed second by second as Yi Shiwen went into closed-door training. While Yi Shiwen was in closed-door training, the Astral Star Sect was in a turbulent situation. The battle between the eastern region and the outer region was getting more and more intense. The casualties on both sides were also getting more and more intense, and the Astral Star Sect was recruiting more and more new disciples. More and more disciples came in, which led to a storm in the Astral Sect. Especially among the young disciples, there were even more dazzling stars. Among these people, Sun Ziwang was like a comet, and stood out among the many disciples. He had already surpassed all the disciples of the same generation who had entered the sect at the same time as him after only 20 years of cultivation. He had become the number one person among the disciples of the same generation. After 200 years, he had proven his Tao with strength that far surpassed his peers. He had directly broken the record of becoming a god in the Astral Star Sect. The entire Astral Star Sect was shocked after receiving the news that he had proven his Tao and become a god. That was because Sun Ziwang hadn't proven his Tao and become a god in the outer region. Instead, he had proven his Tao and become a god in the outer region. This period was fake. Sun Ziwang would return to the Astral Star Sect for a fixed period of time to receive Yi Shiwen's guidance. Then, he would fight in the outer region. He didn't even stay in the Astral Star Sect for a long time. Moreover, many disciples had entered the Astral Star Sect during these years. Therefore, many people didn't know that Sun Ziwang had thoroughly shocked the entire Astral Star Sect when he had returned. Sun Ziwang's cultivation age was less than 1,000 years. Being able to cultivate to the point of confirming the Tao in a mere 1,000 years was extremely rare in the Astral Star Sect. Even in the entire Astral Star Sect, there were only a few existences that could do so. Sun Ziwang's performance soon attracted the attention of the higher-ups of the Astral Star Sect. Although Sun Ziwang was a disciple of the Astral Star Sect, the Astral Star Sect itself was a subordinate sect of the Astral Star Sect. Since Sun Ziwang's performance was outstanding, it was possible for him to be transferred to the Astral Star Sect. However, this was just the beginning. After proving his Tao, Sun Ziwang only used a few hundred years to cultivate to the peak of Tao confirmation. Such cultivation progress shocked the entire Astral Star Sect. Even the Astral Star Sect's patriarch was moved. However, as more and more people paid attention to this matter, the fact that Sun Ziwang didn't practice the martial arts of the Astral Star Sect was also dug out. Sun Ziwang's demonic power was still very conspicuous. Especially as Sun Ziwang's cultivation gradually rose, he couldn't hide his demonic qi even if he wanted to. Sun Ziwang didn't have the intention to hide it. In the Fortune God dynasty, although the devil race had many enemies, and the devil path had many powerful enemies, the devil path wasn't a taboo in the Fortune God dynasty. There were many people who practiced the devil path's martial arts, so it wasn't a big deal. Although he didn't practice the martial arts of the Astral Star Sect, it wasn't a big deal. There were many dazzling geniuses in this world. Which one of them only practiced the martial arts of their sect? They had all kinds of fortuitous encounters, and the martial arts they learned were like the stars in the sky, innumerable. Although it was a small problem that he didn't practice the martial arts of the astral star sect, it wasn't a big deal. Most importantly, the talent and cultivation aptitude that Sun Ziwang displayed was worthy of the attention of the entire astral star sect. Moreover, as time went by, Sun Ziwang's cultivation speed didn't slow down. On the contrary, with the development of the heavenly devil's physique, his cultivation speed also gradually increased. It didn't slow down because of the advancement of the realm. On the contrary, it was further improved. But soon, many rumors about Sun Ziwang being guided by an expert also spread. Everyone could see that the demonic technique that Sun Ziwang practiced was a very profound martial art. Even though he had cultivated to the Tao-confirming realm, it didn't slow down because of this. On the contrary, it was still constantly improving. This was the power of a high-grade cultivation technique. After cultivating a low-grade cultivation technique to a high-grade realm, it would gradually slow down. However, if one cultivated a high-grade cultivation technique, the higher the cultivation, the faster the cultivation speed would be. The higher the cultivation, the more obvious the effect of the cultivation would be. Furthermore, what he had learned were all demonic arts. He had not only obtained the inheritance of a single martial art, but had obtained a systematic inheritance. Moreover, there were also ordinary martial art inheritances from time to time. This quickly attracted the attention of many people. Many people remembered that Sun Ziwang had once knelt on the stone steps for 10 years. This matter was rarely mentioned after Sun Ziwang's rise. But now, as this speculation came out, many people thought in this direction because it sounded like this possibility was the most likely. At first, it sounded very ridiculous and unreliable. However, now that they thought about it, it wasn't impossible. Sun Ziwang seemed to have risen after that. It was hard to say whether he had obtained the inheritance of a super expert or not. Many people had already confirmed this. After all, this was the most likely explanation. Sun Ziwang had never answered this question, and with his current status, if he didn't answer it himself, who could force him to answer? Although the higher-ups also wanted to know, everyone had their own fortuitous encounters. It was impossible for them to expel a disciple with a limitless future because of this. After Sun Ziwang's fame had shaken the world with his demonic techniques, it had even attracted the attention of some big shots of the Devil Path. Some big shots of the Devil Path had even asked the Astral Sect if they could give this disciple to them. For the Astral Sect, the demonic techniques that Sun Ziwang had learned might cause some argument. However, for the Devil factions, Sun Ziwang, who had obtained the inheritance of demonic techniques, was the best disciple. It was even possible for him to obtain a matchless demonic technique. In addition, Sun Ziwang had shown his talent in cultivating demonic technique. This had made the Devil factions people very thirsty. There were also many people who had secretly contacted Sun Ziwang, and there were even a lot of Devil cult members who offered him the position of a Devil cult's holy son as long as he handed over the Devil power that he was practicing and surrendered to them. Then his future would be limitless. However, Sun Ziwang wasn't moved by these enticements. It didn't matter whether they came from the higher-ups of the Astral Sect or the Devil factions. In fact, he didn't even move a little. That was because he knew very well who he had. So, he naturally didn't dare to express anything without Yi Shiwen's permission. Moreover, as far as he was concerned, how could a holy son and the like compare to his current situation? Yi Shiwen had taught him the demonic techniques over the years. His skills had advanced by leaps and bounds. In a short time, he had already left the other disciples far behind, and had become the focus of countless people's attention. For him, the Astral Sect was his master's sect. However, Yi Shiwen had recognized his worth. So, it was impossible for him to betray him. Therefore, he had always completely ignored these enticements. Sun Ziwang's approach had aroused the anger of some people. Chapter 30-37. Sun Ziwang's indifferent attitude soon attracted the dissatisfaction of many people, including some well-known demonic path powerhouses. For them, what kind of glory was it to extend an olive branch to a junior with their status? However, the result was that they were rejected. It could even be said that they were ignored. They didn't even have the slightest bit of interest. The high-level officials of the Constellation sect also rejected Sun Ziwang. This was also Yi Shiwen's intention. They were merely a group of quasi-emperors. They didn't even have emperor-monarch level experts. There was no need to think too much. Although this might offend some people, in Yi Shiwen's view, this was also a kind of tempering. Unless there was an expert of emperor-monarch level, Yi Shiwen wouldn't even look at them. However, experts of emperor-monarch level would not care about such a small matter. The speed of Sun Ziwang's rise was so fast that even the head of the Constellation sect and the high-level officials of the Constellation sect began to pay attention. However, for experts of emperor-monarch level, it was nothing. How could an ant-like existence attract the attention of existences of that level? Only those who had reached the level of Bai Daozi and Tian Miao Fairy would be able to attract their attention. Because these people had truly touched the level of Emperor-Monarch, there was a possibility that they would truly enter that realm. Therefore, they would be worthy of a second glance. However, it was just a second glance. For example, when Bai Daozi faced Yi Shiwen, he killed him without the slightest scruple. After Sun Ziwang rejected the recruitment of many great figures from all sides, Sun Ziwang encountered a lot of trouble. The people of the demonic path had always been straightforward. Almost immediately after Sun Ziwang rejected the recruitment of all sides, he was attacked by the people of the demonic path. In particular, Sun Ziwang traveled between the outer domain and the Constellation sect all year round. In the outer domain itself there was chaos and chaos. Experts from all sides intersected, making it extremely chaotic. The revenge of the devil experts soon arrived. They launched several surprise attacks and almost beheaded Sun Ziwang, but in the end, Sun Ziwang used his devil wings to escape. Although the devil wings that Yi Shiwen had taught him were not the devil wings that he had fused with the power of time and space laws, but for these gods, it was still an extremely fast agility technique. Even if the people chasing him were far more powerful than him, he still managed to escape. After being hunted down several times, not only did Sun Ziwang not die, on the contrary, after escaping from death a few times, his cultivation soared and he broke through to the imperishable realm. In turn, he killed some fiend celestials of the fiendish Tao, causing his reputation to soar. However, this did not scare the demonic path experts. On the contrary, it completely enraged the demonic path experts, leading to more suppression and pursuit. Normally speaking, no matter how arrogant the devil path experts were, they wouldn't dare to brazenly pursue and kill people who had a master. Especially when there was a colossus like the astral sect behind the astral sect. They couldn't rashly start a war. However, because Sun Ziwang didn't respond to the astral sect's higher-ups' attempts to rope him in, some people in the astral sect wanted to teach this kid who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a lesson. Once he suffered enough, he would naturally know how precious these olive branches were. Therefore, the higher-ups of the astral sect adopted a rare tacit attitude towards the desperate pursuit of the devil path experts. The devil path experts didn't know why, but since it was so, they couldn't let Sun Ziwang off. For Sun Ziwang, this was the most difficult day. The devil path experts who had no scruples chased after Sun Ziwang in wave. Sun Ziwang was chased to the point that he wished he was dead. There were several times when he narrowly escaped death, and even when he narrowly escaped death, he finally managed to escape. During this process, Sun Ziwang's strength also improved at an astonishing speed. He had obtained tremendous growth. Especially after several life and death experiences, his strength had increased rapidly. He was approaching the peak of the imperishable realm at an astonishing speed. As time went by, Sun Ziwang's reputation in the astral sect also became more and more resounding. The rumors about the expert behind him also gradually died down. That was because everyone in the astral sect knew how many times Sun Ziwang had been chased and assassinated during this period of time. If he really had the support of a top-notch expert, then that expert would have watched helplessly as his successor was chased everywhere and almost killed. Moreover, it wasn't just once or twice but countless times. The number of times Sun Ziwang had been hunted down over the years was shocking even to the higher-ups of the Constellation sect. They simply couldn't imagine it. If they were in Sun Ziwang's shoes, they would have died a long time ago. During this process, the devil power that Sun Ziwang cultivated had also entered the eyes of countless people. Although no one could recognize the devil power that Sun Ziwang had cultivated, they could see that the devil power that Sun Ziwang had cultivated was of an extremely high level. In fact, it wasn't the slightest bit inferior to the several great devil sects that had been passed down for generations. At this time, everyone could see that Sun Ziwang had probably obtained the inheritance of a devil monarch. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to have such an amazing performance. It was no wonder that many experts of the devil sects would go all out to hunt down Sun Ziwang. After all, everyone was very clear about what the inheritance of a devil monarch meant. If one could obtain the complete inheritance of a devil monarch, even if he couldn't re-establish a great sect, he could immediately transcend. His future achievements would be limitless. Even if it was impossible to prove the Tao and become an emperor, but at least he would end up as a peak quasi-emperor. For the vast majority of people, an emperor was no different than a legend. It was simply unattainable. Even if it was merely a peak quasi-emperor, it was already an unimaginable achievement for ordinary people. Although there were many people in the Constellation sect who were envious of Sun Ziwang, who possessed the inheritance of the devil monarch, they were still of the same sect after all. There were still many old monsters in the Constellation sect. These people would absolutely not allow their fellow sect members to kill each other for an inheritance to this extent. After all, the Constellation sect was also a great sect that had been passed down for generations. Moreover, there was an emperor presiding over it. Although they were envious of the inheritance of another devil monarch, they would not act recklessly. Moreover, as time passed, everyone could see that Sun Ziwang's present achievements had a lot to do with his physique. Not everyone was suitable to cultivate this devil power. Instead of competing for the inheritance of the devil monarch, it was better to win over Sun Ziwang as early as possible. Even if he couldn't become an emperor in the future, he could still add another super expert to the Constellation sect. If he became an emperor, it would be even more amazing. He would almost immediately establish a sect and become another giant of the Constellation sect. Moreover, the Constellation sect could not target Sun Ziwang just because he had a fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, the entire Constellation sect would be in a state of panic. Therefore, a strange scene had formed over the years. Sun Ziwang was constantly being hunted down, but the Constellation sect did not make any movements at all. It was as if they were letting him be hunted down. In the beginning, those devil experts still had some misgivings. However, as time passed, such misgivings also disappeared without a trace. They began to desperately hunt him down. In fact, all of this was seen by Yi Shiwen. After all, he was an emperor. It was too easy for him to see these things. However, he did not make a move because he had reached the most critical moment. He could not fail even once to break through to the fourth realm. He could not relax even once. There was no chance for him to make a move. Moreover, this was also a test he gave to Sun Ziwang. If he could not even pass this test, then what qualifications did he have to accept the inheritance of the devil monarch? To put it cruelly, if Sun Ziwang died, he could still wait for the next one. It was not a big deal at all. As long as he was still alive, the inheritance of the devil monarch would not be broken. The word Tao evolved into countless Tao characters that poured into his mind. Tried to use the simplest words to explain all the ways of the world. In front of Yi Shiwen, numerous cracks began to appear on that Tao character. After Yi Shiwen had comprehended it countless times, this Tao character finally couldn't withstand it anymore, and cracks began to appear on it. This was also the reason why Yi Shiwen said that he could only succeed once and could not fail. Because once the word Tao in front of him cracked, he could not find another word Tao to replace it. After all, this was only a rubbed version of the word Tao and not the real word Tao. Could not be like the real word Tao that could withstand countless comprehensions and be fine. It was already a critical moment. However, Yi Shiwen's state of mind was under the protection of the enlightening mind ancient tree. It was as if he was casually dealing with a very small matter. It was not a big deal at all. He opened his mouth and swallowed another yellow middle plum. This was the 10th yellow middle plum that he had swallowed in the past few years. Each yellow middle plum contained an inexhaustible amount of energy. One could well imagine what he had achieved in the past few years. He didn't know how much time had passed. He could only see the Tao characters flying all over the sky of the entire microcosm. It seemed as if they were sensing something. They were flying in a special trajectory. On the other side of the microcosm, Sun Ziwang had just returned from the outer domain. He was dumbstruck when he saw this scene. He couldn't help but open his mouth and ask, what is this? My main body is about to make a breakthrough. And it's right in front of me. Yi Shiwen's doppelganger frowned and said. His mind was connected to his main body. So, he naturally knew that this was the most critical moment. He didn't even have the mood to ask Sun Ziwang about his harvest this time. He just stared at his main body in the depths of the microcosm. Sun Ziwang swallowed a mouthful of saliva when he heard this. He still had an incredulous look on his face. Is this the breakthrough of an emperor lord? To think that he would actually encounter such a thing. It was simply a stroke of luck. Suddenly, a monstrous aura spread from the depths of the microcosm. This aura seemed as if it would break the vault of heaven. It diffused in all directions. Which Taoist brother is here? A majestic voice suddenly came from outside the microcosm. Chapter 30-38. Just as Sun Ziwang was dumbfounded, the endless laws in the entire microcosm were dancing and cheering. It was as if the world was being reborn from a cocoon. An astonishing scene that he had never seen before was unfolding in front of him. Emperor, so this is the power of an emperor. Although he had experienced many life and death situations in the past few years, he could be considered to be extremely glorious. He was the focus of countless people, and it was unavoidable for him to feel a little complacent in his heart. However, at this moment, this complacency disappeared without a trace. Only at this moment did he truly understand what the might of a sovereign emperor was. Although he had deliberately controlled it, the aura that spread out still made him feel the difference between heaven and earth. At this time, he really understood why an emperor was the real ruler of the world. In front of a real emperor, a quasi-emperor was simply not enough. Immediately, there was a burst of joy in his heart. Although Yi Shiwen was only imparting martial arts on behalf of the Demon King, in his heart, he was no different from a teacher. Now that his teacher had made a breakthrough, he was naturally very happy in his heart. But before he could react, a strange change occurred. Which fellow Taoist is here? Suddenly, a majestic voice came from outside the microcosm. This voice suddenly startled Sun Ziwang. Even Yi Shiwen's primordial spirit avatar slightly frowned. However, before they could react, a voice came from the depths of the microcosm. Fellow Taoist, please come in. This was Yi Shiwen's voice. Immediately after, an opening automatically appeared in the pocket dimension, and a figure flew out. It was a handsome middle-aged man, but he had a medium build and wore a long robe made of golden star crystals. He exuded an unparalleled majesty and grace, stepping on a rainbow of starlight as he descended. Supreme Leader! Sun Ziwang took a deep breath. Although he had never seen the person in front of him, it did not prevent him from knowing who the person in front of him was. This was the supreme leader of the astral sect, and also the only emperor of the astral sect, Star Emperor. He was known as the supreme monarch who controlled the infinite stars. At the same time, he was also the invincible figure who founded the astral sect. However, in the past tens of millions of years, he had gradually moved behind the scenes. The affairs of the entire astral sect were managed by his eldest disciple, who was also the deputy sect leader of the astral sect. However, although he didn't care about worldly affairs and the disciples in recent years couldn't see him, it didn't prevent him from knowing about the deeds of the person in front of him. He was really incomparably valiant. Unarmed, he established the foundation of the astral sect in the eastern region, surrounded by many great sections. Moreover, he brought the astral sect to its current status. He had supreme authority in the astral sect. Although Sun Ziwang had never seen the real person, he had seen drawings, so he recognized it at a glance. To him, it had always been a legend, but now the legend had actually appeared here. To him, this was undoubtedly a great shock. Although Yi Shiwen was also a sovereign emperor, Yi Shiwen was a stranger to him after all. He wasn't a great figure like the Star Emperor who deeply influenced the constellation sect. Yi Shiwen sat cross-legged on the cloud bed and retracted all his aura like an ordinary person. The Star Emperor walked in slowly and said, "It turns out that you're a guest. Why didn't you inform me?" The Star Emperor's expression was calm, but there was a hint of dissatisfaction in his words. One should know that the astral sect was his inheritance. Now, another sovereign emperor had appeared in his sect without a sound. This was tantamount to a provocation. If it wasn't for the commotion when Yi Shiwen broke through and was detected by him, he didn't know how long he would be kept in the dark. It was impossible to say that he didn't mind at all. "It's rude of me to come here without notice. I'm just borrowing your treasured land to cultivate." Yi Shiwen slowly explained that he didn't have any malicious intent. The Star Emperor nodded in agreement. It was precisely because of this that he didn't immediately start a fight. Otherwise, with his temper, he would probably fight to the death. For the sovereign emperors, this was a taboo. Because the Fortune God dynasty was big enough, it wasn't a problem for each sovereign to rule a region. Therefore, many sovereign emperors were often sensitive to this issue. "But does brother want to accept my sect's Sun Ziwang as a disciple?" asked the Star Emperor. During this period of time, he had heard about Sun Ziwang when he came out of closed-door cultivation. Such a small character couldn't possibly attract his attention. However, this Sun Ziwang had obtained the inheritance of a devil king, which attracted his attention. He was also a sovereign emperor. Naturally, he knew very well that it wasn't easy to obtain the complete inheritance of a sovereign emperor. What he was more afraid of was that this Sun Ziwang was a spy left behind by another devil king. If this was really the case, this Sun Ziwang would inevitably become a big trouble for the astral sect when he grew up. Therefore, he personally came to investigate. He didn't expect to encounter Yi Shiwen's cultivation breakthrough, and coincidentally caught some clues. "I think brother has misunderstood. I don't have the intention to accept him as a disciple. In fact, I'm just accepting a disciple on behalf of Senior Devil King. This is also his last wish. His earth-shattering devil power can't be cut off here." Yi Shiwen naturally understood what the Star Emperor was thinking. In this kind of situation, everyone would be very careful. Not to mention, he was very talented, and would become the target of the sect's full cultivation. Therefore, he must be very cautious. At the same time, he also indicated that he wasn't the creator of the devil power. Compared to a living sovereign emperor, a dead devil king would undoubtedly make many people feel more at ease. Sure enough, the Star Emperor's complexion immediately became better. He could see that Yi Shiwen's cultivation was unfathomable, and he couldn't see through it. However, it was obvious that Yi Shiwen wasn't a devil cultivator. Moreover, Yi Shiwen's words also made him feel completely relieved. A living sovereign emperor might stir up trouble, but a dead sovereign emperor could only be regarded as a fortuitous encounter. At the same time, he was a little excited in his heart. If Sun Ziwang could thoroughly cultivate his devil power to the peak, it might be possible for the astral sect to have another devil king. Although the cultivation of the astral sect was quite different from that of the devil cultivators, it would at most allow him to establish his own sect again. Compared to the temptation of having another sovereign emperor, it was nothing at all. Then, I really have to thank brother for imparting the power. The Star Emperor nodded lightly, officially confirming Sun Ziwang's affiliation, and included him in the key cultivation target of the astral sect. At this time, standing in his position, he naturally had to thank Yi Shiwen on behalf of his disciple. Brother, you don't have to thank me. I also saw that he was born with the heavenly devil physique, which is suitable for practicing devil power. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen him, Yi Shiwen said with a smile. How should I address you, brother? Star Emperor looked at Yi Shiwen and asked. My name is Yi Shiwen, Martial Emperor. Yi Shiwen opened his mouth and looked at the Star Emperor. He didn't have the slightest intention to conceal himself. The Star Emperor had never heard of the title of Martial Emperor. Obviously, he didn't know anyone. However, Yi Shiwen's name was really like a thunderclap piercing the ears. His name had been extremely famous recently. Although the Star Emperor was in closed-door training, it didn't mean that he wasn't aware of these matters. The heavenly Taoism had come to investigate several times. This matter had even alarmed the Star Emperor, who was in closed-door training. So, he was very clear about it. However, he didn't care about it at first because he really didn't know Yi Shiwen. He didn't usually do anything shameful, so he naturally wasn't afraid of ghosts knocking on his door in the middle of the night. However, he had never expected that Yi Shiwen was actually hiding in his sect. Although it was only the astral sect and not the astral sect, the Star Emperor looked at Yi Shiwen secretly with fear in his eyes. From the information collected from various aspects, this martial emperor wasn't as harmless as he appeared to be. In fact, he was an extremely dangerous existence. He could offend a colossus like the heavenly Taoism just like that. He could also kill an emperor lord like the Shura Holy Emperor just like that. Such a person was directly on the dangerous list for emperor lords like them because this person absolutely didn't show mercy. Once they offended him, it was very likely that they would face the situation of death from the other party's revenge. Oh, it's fellow Taoist Martial Emperor, said the Star Emperor as he cupped his hands. However, he had no intention of passing the news to the heavenly Taoism because he and the heavenly Taoism weren't on good terms. This was something that everyone in the entire Fortune God dynasty didn't know. The heavenly Taoism was a big family with countless experts in the sect. There were also many vassal sections. The experts were like the sand in the Ganges River. However, because of this, they also had countless enemies and had countless enemies. This Star Emperor was one of them. Moreover, the Star Emperor was one of the most powerful enemies of the heavenly Taoism. When he had founded the Constellation sect, he had faced the attacks and interference of the heavenly Taoism. His sect had almost perished. How could he let go of this deep-seated hatred? Although the Star Emperor didn't make any substantial retaliation because of the huge influence of the heavenly Taoism, it didn't mean that he had let go of the deep-seated hatred of the heavenly Taoism. At this time, he naturally hoped that the heavenly Taoism would cause more trouble. Therefore, he didn't have the slightest intention to inform the heavenly Taoism even if the reward was very generous. Yi Shiwen looked at the Star Emperor with a smile. He knew this, so he finally chose the Constellation Sect as the final place for closed-door training. It was different from other places. Even if he was discovered here, he wouldn't be betrayed and attract a large number of experts of the heavenly Taoism. Brother Martial Emperor has come as a guest, so I should show some hospitality as a host. I wonder if you have time to go to my humble house for a chat? The Star Emperor said after a pause. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.